just shit in my pants. No idea how it happened. I think I just shit in my pants. The smell is so bad, nobody's laughing, yeah. I guess I just shit in my pants. Woo!
I'm here at St Thomas's where I've just had my first AstraZeneca vaccine, and quite literally I did not feel a thing.
The AstraZeneca COVID vaccine is being withdrawn worldwide after the pharmaceutical giant admitted it causes a rare and dangerous side effect. AstraZeneca admitted the claims in court documents.
Our expert committee on the safety of medicines, the Pharmacovigilance and Risk Assessment Committee, has now come to a conclusion on the review of cases of blood clots in people vaccinated with AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine.
AstraZeneca admitted their COVID-19 vaccine can cause a rare blood clot condition known as TTS. TTS is a syndrome that causes people to have blood clots.
Get your jab when you're asked to do so. It's good for you, it's good for your family, and it's a great thing for the whole country. So please get your...
Has come under intense scrutiny in recent months over a rare side effect which causes blood clots.
The committee also concluded that the vaccine is not associated with an increase in the overall risk of thromboembolic events or blood clots.
The freedom and democracy.
In 2021, it was recognised that these clotting disorders could occur. I mean, the rate that's widely quoted, which sounds about right, is 15 for every million jabs.
Alyssa, this really is the calm before the storm.
Not again, no!
Absolutely vital, wherever you live, when you get the notification to come and get a jab, get a vaccination, be sure to do it. It's a wonderful thing. It's very, very safe.
This is a safe and effective vaccine.
Of course, the company don't, I think I'm right in saying, don't have to pay anything out here because they were given immunity from that, as were all the pharmaceutical companies during COVID. It's not only COVID, lots of pharmaceutical companies do get immunity because the nations, I suppose, feel that there is an emergency consideration that comes before all of that.
Deserve to have your rights violated, especially your gun rights, because you're a law-abiding patriot and that's tyranny. But politicians around the country are trying to change the law.
And that could eventually make you a criminal. The same label you use to dehumanize people when cops brutalize them. You keep saying you need guns to fight tyranny, but you've been busy worshiping the authority of the people you'd actually have to fight. And be advised, overthrowing the government is against the law. At what point are you going to stop using the law as your barometer for morality? When are you going to start questioning the power structures that enable tyranny in the first place?
Including politicians and your heroes in uniform and what they both do in your name and with your money, using violence to assert their authority and violate all of your freedoms, not just your gun rights.
Biden and Democrats aren't coming for your guns. Police are, in service of the politicians you distrust. So now you have to decide if you're actually willing to challenge government authority, which doesn't have to mean shooting at or getting violent with cops, but rejecting your blind belief in the legitimacy of their violent authority, the root of the evil the founding fathers you worship warned against, and the foundation of all political power. Or if you'd rather just let them come and take it and keep licking their boots. Because they don't make the laws, they just enforce them, right?
Welcome to the Independent Review, a weekly podcast where we bring you the latest from the world of independent journalism.
It's the fantastic rock. It's the fantastic.
Welcome to another episode of the Independent Review, live on the AM Wakeup channels on Rockfin and Rumble. We have a great show today, so let's get into the first clip with Alison Morrow.
Now, Lisa, you are on the board of Informed Choice Washington. You research legislation for the board members. Informed Choice Washington, we'll talk a little bit about the mission of it, Informed Choice Washington, but let's get right into the topic for today. You wrote the definition of vaccine and discuss how, well, you know what, I'll let you explain, because if this Senate Bill 598 changed the definition of vaccine as a statute to expand new technologies. So let's talk about what preempted that. Why did they do that? And, big picture, why should we even care? And welcome, by the way.
Thank you. Glad to be here. And I'm grateful for this opportunity to share with your listeners what I've been learning about this Washington Vaccine Association. I'll call it WVA for short. This is an entity formed by the legislature of Washington State in 2010. It's a universal vaccine purchase program. The way it works is that WVA collects money from payers, usually private insurance companies, when those private insurance companies' subscribers, pediatric patients, are administered vaccines in Washington. They collect these assessments and turn them over to Department of Health. Department of Health turns around and purchases vaccines on the childhood schedule from the CDC. So WVA collects a little bit more per dose than DOH pays for the vaccines. Then Department of Health actually takes physical possession of the vaccines they purchase from CDC, and they distribute them to providers here in the state. Pharmacies, doctors, Caravan. Then the providers, this is convenient for them because if they have privately and publicly insured patients, they don't have to keep separate inventories. They don't have to pay inventory costs up front. They don't have to pay for the inventory at all. Tell me this was a multi-part question, Allison. Why should we care?
Well,
WVA
let's go back to the definition change for vaccines. Yeah,
yes.
Change. So I appreciate you're giving that background information, and I will follow up later asking you to repeat the question. You know, what is big? Why should we care about the development of this Washington Vaccine Association? I mean, you know, what's the long-term concern, I guess, about the work that they do? But like, yeah, let's go back in time. This bill that changed the definition. What did it change the definition to, and why does that even matter?
Okay. The definition change that was pursuant to Senate Bill 5982 that just got signed by Governor Inslee on March 13th applies only to the portion of the RCW, the statutes that pertain specifically to Washington Vaccine Association, WVA. They changed the definition so that it took away the words a vaccine is I'm going to just pull up I want to read you exactly the correct wording. It used to say vaccine means, okay, well, they took away all of this part that says a preparation. Sorry.
Yeah, it says vaccine means, and then they took away the part that says a preparation of killed or attenuated living microorganisms or fraction thereof that upon administration stimulates immunity that protects against disease and is. And so it just says now vaccine means an immunization. Is that correct?
Yeah, they added in that word, an immunization, which is not defined anywhere in the statute. The listening in to various public health department meetings, Department of Health, Board of Health, and also WVA's own meetings, even though they're not an agency, they explained that the reason that they sought this statute change was to allow what they called new technologies to be covered under this program. And specifically, the first one that they're going to do is a RSV monoclonal antibody. So it's a form, they say, of passive immunity. So rather than triggering the patient's body to mount an immune response, this new product called Beyfortus, also the generic name is nirsevimab, will apparently provide a passive immunity to respiratory syncytial virus. And this is intended for Newborns between age 0 and 8 months entering their first RSV season, as well as ages 8 months through 19 months for immunocompromised babies and toddlers.
Next, we have a clip from Charlie Robinson on the Great Bank Run of 2024.
Now that we got the business out of the way, I am going to attempt like hell to make banking interesting. I think I might be able to do it. It's not the easiest task in the world. I admit it. But have you heard of the Great Bank Run of 2024? Oh, you haven't? Well, it's because it hasn't happened yet, but it's coming. And when I lay this case out, you're going to be incentivized to reevaluate the relationship that you have with your bank. And by incentivized, it might mean get your money out of there to the extent that you can, meaning that in two ways. First, it's kind of hard to pull yourself out of this banking system after you've built your entire life around it. I get that. But also, when I say pull your money out, like physically pull your money out, try that. Go down to your bank and try and pull, I don't know, if you've got try to pull $5,000 out in cash today. They'll panic. They'll ask you a million questions. They'll tell you that they don't have the money on hand. They'll ask you, do you really want to? I mean, they'll throw up every roadblock that you can think of to try and convince you that you don't really need to do this. They'll ask you very personal questions that it's none of their business. So when I say get your money out of the bank, I mean it in every way that you can. Get yourself less dependent on the bank, because we found the plan and it's not good. And it's here. I'm not making up the plan. We found it. We found the documentation for it. We know how this is going to play out. If you are listening to this in, say, it's the middle of 2024, you don't normally call your shot on a bank run halfway through the year and say it's going to happen this year. You normally like to give yourself 12 months. Look, I don't know. I don't know if it's going to happen actually in 2024. Do you want to be wrong by a day? Probably not. So why don't you act accordingly? So in order to wrap your head around how the Great Bank Run of 2024 happened, you're going to actually have to go back about a decade to 2014 to understand what the G20 bank bail-in law did, and you will understand that it lit a 10-year fuse on the banking system, maybe 11 years. I don't know. It's hard to tell exactly how much time you have left. But I think that once you take a look at what they did in 2014, you might be surprised that the banking system is even still here. Okay? Because I want you to understand what they did. It's not in your best interest, of course. The bankers never make it in your best interest. They did it for them. And when you're talking about the G20, this is a group of nations. It got together and came up with something called the bank bail-in law. And of course, they don't really talk about it too much. You know what a bailout is, right? A bailout is what we had in 2008 in America with the Wall Street crowd, where they said, if you don't give us $700 billion by Monday morning, there'll be civil war. And you never have to twist the government's arm too hard to convince them to give money to banks, because they're all intertwined with the banks anyway. But even the White House was like, that's a lot of money and that's not a lot of time. And why do we need to do this? And Hank Paulson and all the guys, it's all coming down. It's unless you do this. And so the government did give them that money. They bailed them out. It came from outside of the banks. That money was a bailout. Bail-ins is when it comes from inside the banks, when the banks help themselves in order for the management of the bank to survive. See, you have to understand, the managers of the bank run it like a casino, right? It's just leveraged debt, fractional reserve banking, which means you can lend out 9 times more money than you have. I mean, they're playing a confidence game every single day, which is, we hope to God that not more than like 2% of our depositors come in and demand their money back today, because if they do, then I made up 2%, but I don't know exactly what the number is, but there's some threshold at which if that number of people come in demanding their money, we ain't got it. Maybe it's 10%. All right, they're lending out 9 times more money than they have. Whatever it is, It's not like they have $1 million in the bank and then they loan $1 million out. No, they have $1 million in bank and they loan out $9 million. So if something goes wrong, the bank can become insolvent a lot faster than you can, right? You're not loaning out money you don't have. You can't do that. That's called money laundering or counterfeiting. When the banks do it, it's called fractional reserve lending. When you do it, they put you in Pelican Bay. So you have to understand sort of the difference between a bank bailout, when the government comes, that money comes externally into the bank to bail it out, or bail in, which is the money was already in the bank. The management class that's running that bank like a casino has done such a bad job with that they've gone broke. And in order to remain solvent, they look around for money. And the money that they find closest to them is yours as a depositor. And so what they do is they then steal that money. And that's legal for them to do it. And that's the problem, is that that's legal. And it would be one thing if, your mother needed to dip into your account and borrow some money. It's quite another thing when you don't even know the relationship that you have with your bank. You wake up one day and your money's gone, or part of your money's gone. Now, if you think that can't happen, go take a look at the island of Cyprus. Same time this was going on, 2014. What happened there? The banks went insolvent. What happened to the people? They took a haircut on anything above 100,000 euros in their accounts. Okay, I think they lost like I forget exactly what the number was, but it was like anything above 100,000 euros, they lost like half of it or something. So like the lower bank accounts were protected, but they, the reasoning was like, oh my God, this is going to be a catastrophe for the people of Cyprus. And they're like, yeah, it's mostly Russian mob money here anyway. Okay, well, so does that make it all right that you guys are stealing, because you're an insolvent bank? No, of course not. But you have to understand Cyprus. And, because otherwise you're like, oh, bail-ins. I mean, that's just theoretical. No, it's not theoretical. It's actually happened. It happened 10 years ago and it'll happen again. It's going to happen again. You know why I know it's going to happen again? Because they fucking legalized it. That's why I know it's going to happen again. You don't have to speculate. You just have to watch what they're doing. And you have to listen to them too. Because if you listen to these lunatics talk long enough, they will tell you the plan. And when I get through this, I will explain to you where the head lunatic explains the plan. And it's like, well, how can we trust him? Well, look, you can't trust any of these people. Of course, that should go without saying. But listen to what they're talking about. Okay, so this is what the 2014 G20 bank bail-in law did. You listen to this, and just tell me if you think this sounds fair. They can impose the losses of insolvent financial institutions on their stockholders, debt holders, and other unsecured creditors, such as depositors, the largest group, meaning you. Okay? So again, they can impose the losses of insolvent financial institutions, bankrupt banks. They can take the losses of bankrupt banks and put them on their stockholders, debt holders, and unsecured creditors. Now, there's a pecking order between those, right? Stockholders, debt holders, and unsecured creditors are not created equal. If you're an unsecured creditor, like a depositor, like you and me in a bank, you are at the bottom of the list. You're in third position, which ain't great. Okay. Your best bet is that you have the FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, back you up with your money, because the FDIC will protect you up to $250,000 of deposits, except that there's kind of a problem with the FDIC. Well, you're making an assumption that they're solvent too. They have, of all of the money in banks that the FDIC has basically their own little stash to make you whole if your bank falls apart. Of all the total money in the banks, the FDIC only has 1.6% of that. So if everything goes wrong, if there's a systemic banking collapse, they don't have enough to do it. If the branch manager disappears with some of the money, you're fine. But if your entire, if your regional bank goes bust, maybe. If all regional banks go bust or a dozen of them go, no, the FDIC has 1.6% of all dollars on hand. So they're not going, theoretically you'll get $1.60 on your $100 that you have deposited. But that is making the assumption that the FDIC still has that money, because they took that 1.6 billion of deposits and they invested it in bonds, which are now upside down. So this firewall is going to fail as well. If you're thinking, well, yeah, there might be a banking collapse, but we've got the FDIC. I'm telling you right now, that firewall that you think is going to protect you is going to fail. And it'll fail in the first week. And that'll really freak people out. So part of this is like boring money, bank. It's not the most exciting thing. If you need a little thrill then to make this more exciting to you, just think of what the psychological impacts of this will be on society. When people realize their money is gone. What are they going to do? We've already seen poor behavior under the best of circumstances, like going to a Walmart on a Wednesday. That turns into an adventure. What if nothing works? What if your bank account has no money in it anymore? What if there's an entire month where they're trying to sort this whole thing out? What they do in this 2014 situation is that they say, yeah, of course, we can take your money and make these insolvent banks, a little bit less insolvent. But we're not going to just steal your money, because that would be downright criminal. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to convert your money into stock in a bank that is currently insolvent, because and it's currently insolvent because your money is being converted into bank stock because it's insolvent. So congratulations, you are now the proud owner of bank stock shares in a bank that's upside down. You have stock in a failing company. Thanks for watching that clip. If you want to hear the entire episode in audio format, just go wherever podcasts are served, search for Macroaggressions, subscribe to the show, and please rate it when you get a chance. Thanks, everybody.
Next is this interview on TNT Radio with Johny Vedmore and his guest Caroline Coram.
It just didn't happen when you were there. We have had reports coming in from South America, actually, that there is quite a lot of weather modification, we call it. Geoengineering can be anything to do with the ground, underground water and everything. So we call it weather modification to be more specific. So no, it doesn't just happen in the West. It's just the West are better at mitigation of the various toxins we're being exposed to. So, for example, I was telling Neil the other day that aluminium oxide actually is a perfect fit for the gas version of the chemical 33. And so basically, if they put it in the sky and our guys come and lay a cloud blanket underneath, it's just going to be absorbed by that. I mean, it's not perfect, doesn't absorb all of it, but it absorbs a lot of it.
You mentioned lightning earlier, and I've heard you refer to it as dark lightning. Now, that's something that I don't know about. So what is it, and why should we all know about it? Because obviously it seems like it's important.
Yeah, normally, 500 years ago, we probably wouldn't have seen more than a few bolts of lightning per storm. And now we're seeing, I think yesterday, 40,000 bolts was the tally just from the storm that went from Paris up into the UK. So 40,000 is huge. So if you think that one bolt across the sky might emit, what happens is when the energy builds up, it creates an ionic charge. And then when the lightning bolt explodes or bursts, it then emits gamma radiation. And it's a very small dose per bolt, very, very small, and it spreads out and you wouldn't really notice it if there were just one bolt and there were no chemicals in the air. Well, obviously, if you're standing next to it, it's going to make you feel a bit rough. But if you times that by 40,000 bolts, and then you consider that COVID is a hemolytic disease or poisoning, and that's where your red blood cells are popped, and out comes all of the iron. So it's all unbound. It's not protected. So we metals in our body don't wander around on their own. They have to be protected. We have to be protected from them. And iron particularly, it can be very, very toxic. So when this gas comes along, it breaks the iron free, and then the lightning bolts start, and everybody starts to feel really unwell. They get migraines, they might get palpitations, they might get worse, actually. Gentleman the other day did end up in hospital with a heart attack, I believe.
Definitely want to say to the people in the chat, if you've got any questions, ask them. I know someone asked earlier, they said, when Caroline comes on, ask her about heat spots, but that's all that they said. So I don't know if that makes any sense. Please tell me.
Yeah, so heat spots, well done for asking, because
it's Daniel who asked, and he's a very good guy.
Yeah, we have to go with our gut on this. And we do know from one person that dared to go down on the ground to check out a really big section of heat spots that was showing on the map. Unfortunately, they got wise to the fact that we were going down, or people were going down, excuse me. And they basically made it so we couldn't zoom in on the map anymore. So we roughly know where these things are happening. But basically, this person went down to this site with a lot of heat underneath, showing on Zoom Earth, and they basically, they could see smoke coming out of the ground, and there was non-civilian fire people there who were checking the heat of the tarmac. That's a heat spot.
Right.
It's underground. Excuse me. You might have to talk for a minute. It's underground.
Because I mean, I've seen a lot of talk over the past few years about forest fires and things like that being caused by maybe lasers from above, weather something, satellites. But do you think they're drawing up heat from the ground then, from underneath the earth?
I think we're being invaded, or they're trying to. They did invade us, and we've beaten them back, from what we can tell. Because usually what we were seeing was a lot of this aerial activity that isn't chemtrails, let's call it. And that was happening inland all over the country at low level. And that usually for us, we interpret that as there are hostile troops under there. And what they do is they use us as shields. So they will make us a bit sick and then a little bit more sick. And so that when the guys kind of try to go in to get them out, they can kind of make us sicker. Do you see what I mean? So it's kind of edging us towards the point where we would become very ill and overwhelm the services that would be able to help us in any other circumstance. But if you make everybody really, really ill, then it's going to get overwhelming. I mean, Plymouth Hospital, for example, was overwhelmed the other day from the first round of lightning, and then they had another, round of lightning on the south coast yesterday. So the idea, we believe, I mean, the military are probably sitting there giggling at what I'm saying, but this is roughly where we're at, that we don't see any of this low-level gridding, or very little inland in the UK now. Most of it is offshore, high level, and that's just generally to keep us quite poorly. And when they do go inland, it's very quick, and they don't stick around for very long. And I guess that's because we are doing quite well in beating them away from the door, basically, underground. Yeah.
Now, let's take a look at this clip from the Indie News Network with Indy and Reef.
Who are these people?
Stella Assange. We all know who she is, right? This week was World Press Freedom Day on Friday. She has a Substack, also stellaassange.substack.com. Here's her meeting with Jeremy Corbyn. And she asked everyone to record a video to speak up for Assange, taking part in that. To record a little something saying that I'm speaking up for Assange on World Press Freedom Day. Free him, free us all. Show up on May 20th, which is the new hearing date. So that was one of the things that they wanted to get through. Here is one of the things that's just kind of promoting this. So she shares kind of weekly updates like we do over at INN Stack. But I noticed that there was an absence of A, talking about the journalists murdered, and B, talking about Julian Assange on World Press Freedom Day. There was a lot of gaslighting. For example, Reporters Without Borders decided to say that there were 0 killed and 0 journalists detained as of today in the United Kingdom. So our friend Matt O'Brien, how the fuck does RSF International omit the greatest journalist in the world that's in jail in the UK? Why don't you just surrender us to all to tyranny with your cowardly silence, or better yet, fuck off and let someone with integrity stand up? And then this one,
tyranny.
Here, this clown. Even the CPJ says that he's not a journalist. Yeah, except for all these other organizations that state otherwise. In 14 years, nobody's provided any evidence that he did anything but award-winning journalism. If you have it, post it below. Yeah. Now, we can debate whether he's a journalist. No, you can't. And he's also a publisher. And it's political. So therefore, you cannot keep him locked up. Let him go.
Julian.
This shit was wow. And it got Misty so pissed off. World Press Freedom Day is always good for some insane hypocrisy. How many times have these douche canoes been asked about Assange and refused to answer? Shut the entire fuck up, you mouthpieces for power. Dude, I'm not going to play this.
Inflatable Sagar.
Yeah, well, I'm not even going to give Saga the credit. I'm going to call him Inflatable Vivek.
Okay.
But this is the gaslight of all gaslights. It's less than a minute. Screw it.
From war zones to
angry.
oppressive regimes, every day journalists put themselves on the front line in search of the truth.
They shine a light on injustice. They hold leaders accountable.
They tell the stories needing to be told.
It's selfless work, and it's essential work.
It's through their reporting and courage
that we become aware of all that is happening across our planet.
And it's only by knowing
We're
that
sorry.
we can work toward achieving progress.
We're sorry.
Today, we honor the journalists who have risked their lives, and for some, lost their lives, in the quest for the truth.
Whether you're in the briefing room with us or reporting from a country far away,
thank you for using your pen or camera
to help us understand all that's happening in the world.
Even when we're calling you out for being corrupt, lying motherfuckers, thank you.
Yeah.
Don't lie on the public platform.
So, another fucking douchebag. Without protest, we would still live in a segregated country. Without protest, women would still be second-class citizens. Without protest, the LGBTQ plus community would be still hiding in their identities. Yeah, great. Except that you're now going to vote for the anti-Semitism bill, you dickhead.
Your financial support.
So Misty very astutely points out that if you support the First Amendment, why haven't you spoken in defense of journalist and publisher Julian Assange? And some asshole, Google is free, literally quoting a tweet from 2019 where he never mentions Julian Assange. Now, it's in response to Assange being locked up 6 weeks after he's taken from the embassy, by the way. So, just to remind this
Price
asshole,
is wrong, bitch.
5 years since April 11, 2019, 0 mentions of Julian Assange's name, 0 requests to Joe Biden and the Justice Department to drop the charges, which as a senator, he's perfectly welcome and capable of doing, and 0 mentions of Assange on the Senate floor by Senator Fuckface McSheepdog.
Bitch, I hope the fuck you do.
And I'm embarrassed to say that I went all World Press Freedom Day without mentioning these two giants, these two kings, Wael Dahdouh and Motaz, who spent 2023 running for their lives and are thankfully healthy and alive. This dude that saw his kids, both of them that have seen their children murdered and continue to report and fight. I love these guys, and everyone should be following them. Motaz has about 1 million followers. Weil has another 685. They should be the 2 most followed guys on this platform. They don't even tweet here much, but yeah, I wanted to make mention of the over 120 Palestinian journalists who were murdered, and I don't think that there was nearly enough. Support independent media. We need it more than ever. I love you all. Good night, fam.
Good night, fam.
Mwah. Ciao, baby.
Next, we have this clip from the David Knight Show.
A Children's Health Defense was an article talking in detail about how pediatricians are paid to vaccinate children. And the thing that I thought was most interesting about this was, you look at this and the guy said, well, we get kickbacks of up to $240 per visit. Well, I don't know how much the vaccines are, but the kickbacks, the incentives, as well as the disincentives, the punishments for not getting kids vaccinated, a lot of those are running through the insurance company. And I didn't realize that. He said, this is Dr. Paul Thomas, a Dartmouth-trained pediatrician. And the question is, asked by the Defender of Children's Health Defense, that's what they call the publication. They said, can pediatricians afford to even run their medical practices without the kickbacks that they get for vaccinating every child? Well, Dr. Paul Thomas said you can't stay in business if you're not giving pretty close to the CDC's vaccination schedule. He ran a general pediatric practice. He had 15,000 patients. And he had 33 staff members. And so he knows what he's talking about. He actually wrote a book, The Vaccine-Friendly Plan, Dr. Paul's Safe and Effective Approach to Immunity and Health from Pregnancy through Your Child's Teen Year. And he gave this to parents in his practice, and he said he gave them a choice. He said they could vaccinate their children on the CDC schedule. They could vaccinate them more slowly, not giving them a bunch of a cluster of vaccines all at once to challenge their immune system, but, stage it out. Do it when their immune system, when their body is a little bit more mature, the immune system is a little bit more mature. And they start vaccinating newborn babies who don't even have an immune system that could respond to that, if you agree with their theory of vaccines, which I don't. But he said, so he gave him a choice. You can use the CDC schedule and give them all the vaccines at the time the CDC says, or you can do it more slowly, waiting for the child's immune system to develop, or you cannot vaccinate at all if you don't want to do it at my practice, he said. But then what he found out was that more and more patients decided that they didn't want the vaccines when it wasn't being pushed on them by a pediatrician. We had that done with us, with our kids. Fortunately, we didn't get our kids vaccinated until they were much older. We didn't take them to the doctor unless they were sick. And then when one of them got sick, we took both of them in, and the doctor just had a fit that we weren't on fluoridated water. And so we're not going to do that because I knew better than that. I'd grown up not being on fluoride. So I knew about fluoride. I didn't at the time know about the vaccine stuff. And they were, I guess, about 4 or 5 years old. One of them was 4, the other one was 5. They're 8 months apart. So He had a fit that they weren't vaccinated, and so he did some vaccines. And Travis has always had reactions to the vaccines. They got worse. We did them again when we traveled, and that was really bad. I had a really bad reaction to it then, and I think it's manifested itself now with some autoimmune disease that he's suffering with. But anyway, they gave parents the option to not do that. And since some of them were not doing it, he said as they started refusing vaccines, he said starting to have a big financial impact on his practice. He and his staff conducted a thorough analysis of their billing records to examine the income generated from vaccine administration fees, markups, and quality bonuses. This is from the insurance companies, the quality bonus tied to vaccination rates. He said we were losing over $1 million in vaccines that were refused. Isn't that amazing? Again, he had, 33? He had 15,000 patients. He said it's very expensive to run a pediatric office. You need multiple nurses. He had 33 staff, multiple nurses, multiple receptionists, multiple billing people, medical records. It's a huge operation. And of course, a big part of the expense is trying to keep up with the insurance companies, dragging their feet, trying to get them to pay you and all the rest of that stuff. That's why I've seen, we found a couple of physicians that will not handle insurance at all. They operate on a cash basis. And they don't, and when you look at what this guy says the insurance companies are doing about the vaccination stuff, you may want to look to find a physician who operates on a cash basis so that he doesn't, because they have a lot of losses from these insurance companies and stuff, and it's a big hassle, and it requires a lot of staff to constantly keep up with this. And then the insurance companies financially push them to do certain things, like vaccinate kids. He said pediatricians receive several types of financial incentives for administering the vaccines. He said the first one, of course, is an administrative fee. He said that is a thank you for giving the shot. He said physicians typically receive about $40 for the first vaccine they give, and then $20 for each subsequent antigen. He said, let's just say a 2-month well baby visit. There is a DPT. He says that's 3 shots, 3 antigens, and then we give them some other things: Hep B, Prevnar, polio, Rota. He says that's about $240. The second way that pediatrician profits is through a small markup on the cost of the vaccines themselves, but he said that's minuscule. Then the third and most substantial financial incentive is the one that I'd never knew about, and that is what they call a quality bonus. It's tied to vaccination rates on a per physician basis. The insurance companies offer pediatricians bonus payments for meeting certain benchmarks, typically about 80% of patients being fully vaccinated by age 2. So this is a push coming from the insurance companies. And so when I saw that, I thought, that makes sense. That's one of the reasons why that executive from the big insurance company, One America, that was in Indiana, that's why he said, we got, as he's explaining to his publicly traded company, he's got to explain it to the investors. Yeah, we've had a rough time here because we've had more insurance claims in the third and fourth quarter of 2021 when the vaccines rolled out. We've had more insurance claims in that amount of time than we would ever expect statistically. This is more than 3 standard deviations away from the mean. And he said, this is not something that you expect at all. It's unprecedented. And he goes, and these are people that are not dying from COVID. And so he goes on to say, though, he says, however, we know they have to be dying from COVID. And we further know that anybody that's vaccinated is not going to die from COVID. Therefore, these are unvaccinated people who are dying from COVID. And we're going to charge unvaccinated people more. Now, somehow, the pharmaceutical industry and the government has got its hooks into these insurance companies because they are telling these pediatricians, you get 80% of your patients fully vaccinated by age 2, and we'll give you a quality bonus. And that's a big dollar contribution to them. So the insurance companies are in on this scam. They're in on it's a payoff to kill people. With his practice's vaccination rate only at 1%, not 80%. He was giving people a choice. He wasn't pushing it to them. Only had 1% of the people getting vaccinated instead of the 80%. He said he was at risk of losing up to 15% of his overall revenue. And anybody who's been in business knows that if you lose 15% of your revenue, it's going to be pretty hard to even stay in business. You lose 25, 30%. That's what I was saying when they did the lockdowns. They said, all right, well, we'll let you open up, a little bit, 1 day a week or something like that. It's like, that's not going to do it for anybody. He said, really, it effectively means that a pediatric practice cannot survive using insurance without doing most of the vaccines, if not all of them, said the doctor. I think that explains the blinders. This is why doctors just won't go there. Why doctors won't look at the fact that these vaccines are causing a lot of harm. The money. The love of money. The root of all evil. Follow the money, Jerry. Yeah, that's what this is really about. And then the interviewer with Children's Health Defense asked him about sudden infant death syndrome. And before I play that for you, I just want to play again that clip. Because, they started talking about sudden adult death syndrome with these vaccines. And this is a mother who, when they started talking about SADS, it clicked as to why her baby died with sudden infant death syndrome.
Out because something that's been going on for over 40 years just hit me. I had a child that died of SIDS in 1984. For people that don't know what SIDS is, it's called sudden infant death syndrome, or crib death was another one. I've been saying this for 40 years, over 40 years. I don't understand this. He was just at the doctor's 2 weeks before, got his shots. He had the perfect health. Everything was great. And then last night, I watched, have you ever watched Mrs. G, the medical examiner? I can't say it now. Anyway, I watched her show, and she says what's at rise right now is the sudden adult syndrome. Same thing as SIDS, but it's for adults. What happened lately that was forced upon people that they had to have? And all of a sudden, the rise of these adults dying for no reason is happening. And then it dawned on me that I poisoned my kid 2 weeks before with a vaccine that I was told was safe. What if that's the cause of sudden infant death syndrome, and they've been lying to us all this time, and they've been experimenting on our babies since 1984 and before, and it's just come to light because we get more education now. We can reach education. We're not just told whatever they want us to tell. We can look research online. What if that's the cause of SIDS? What if me doing what I thought was good killed my baby? And it's just hitting me right now because I never put 2 to 2 together until now. Tell me what you guys think. Do you think I'm kind of off my rocker?
No, she's not off her rocker. Unfortunately, as this doctor pointed out, got to get 80% of those kids 100% vaccinated, or you're going to lose about 15% of your practice's revenue. This is why the doctors don't want to look at it. But when they asked him about SIDS, he says, when you hear the word syndrome, as in sudden infant death syndrome, when you hear the word syndrome, it means we don't know what it is or what causes it. But we actually have a pretty good clue. He said 6 studies examined the correlation between SIDS cases and vaccines. In one data set, 97% were in the first 10 days after the vaccine, just like her son. Only 3% were in the subsequent 10 days. That is amazing. When you got a 97% correlation with something, it looks like a cause to me. Other studies showed similar patterns, with 75 to 90% of SIDS deaths occurring within the first week after vaccination. He also highlighted the increased risk of neurodevelopmental disorders, allergies, autoimmune diseases in vaccinated kids. But again, it's the insurance companies bribing the doctors to vaccinate all the kids. He said, we know without a doubt that things like neurodevelopmental concerns, learning disabilities, ADD, ADHD, autism, these are clearly linked to vaccines. He said, the more you vaccinate, the more likely you are to have these problems. The Amish don't vaccinate. The Amish don't have autism. Vaccinated children are more prone to infections and illness compared to their unvaccinated peers. It's the vaccinated who get more ear infections, more sinus infections, more lung infections. Any kind of infection you look at, the vaccinated get more. Why? Well, their immune system has been attacked. The risks associated with vaccines extend beyond childhood, he said. We have the sudden adult death syndrome now because of the COVID vaccine rollout. He said, we see it on the news, we see it in the ball fields, we see healthy adults, boom, dropping dead. And that has all happened since the Trump shots. He says COVID jabs. They're Trump shots. Trump wants the credit. Give him the credit. He pointed out that despite decades of research, mRNA vaccines have never been proven safe or effective. He cited previous attempts to develop mRNA vaccines for RSV, which consistently failed in animal trials. And we've talked about this before. When they did the animal trials for mRNA versions of an RSV, he said they would vaccinate the rats, and then when they re-exposed those rats in one study, 100% of them died. He also shared a personal story about his mother's experiences with pulmonary fibrosis after receiving 3 COVID vaccines. After her third COVID shot, she started really running out of energy and then getting short of breath. Within a month, her lungs had the appearance of ground glass. And so he was also asked about the risk of vaccine shedding. He said, shedding seems to be happening, and it's been documented in studies. He said, vaccinated individuals can expose others to spike proteins through body fluids and secretions. He said, we can no longer go to our doctor and just say, fix me. That was my cardiologist. I said, well, I need to know more about this, and I think this other thing over here, there's some issues with, oh, you've been talking to Dr. Google? And I just said, yeah, but in my mind, what I said, well, one of us needs to understand and care about what's going on. If you don't care to do the research, I need to do the research. I should have said it to his face, but I just, then I never went back. But anyway, Pfizer alone made over $100 billion, he said, with this. So the power that the public health machinery got to themselves with COVID has to be intoxicating to them. I can no longer trust the CDC, the FDA, the NIH, he said. This is the doctor. Some good people work in these institutions, but these institutions themselves have been captured. He said, when it comes to vaccines or when it comes to new pandemic illnesses, they are the last people you want to trust. And so when we look at cancer mortality, again, after the third vaccine dose, this is where he said his mom had the pulmonary fibrosis. Her lungs looked like ground glass. All these health effects go up exponentially with each successive dose.
This next clip is from the Mel K Show with guest Derrick Broze.
Welcome back to the Mel K Show. Someone who's taught me so much about what really matters right now, especially geopolitically and in terms of the future of liberty and freedom as we know it, is back with me today. I'm honored to have back Derrick Broze. Thank you for joining me, sir.
Thanks for having me on, Mel. I appreciate it.
Thank you. If you aren't following The Conscious Resistance, I will tell you to go over there right now and make sure you subscribe to his newsletter and follow him. He's on the front lines of a lot of topics that most people won't touch. Last time he was here, he was one of the only journalists, if not the only, following the fluoride case, which we're still waiting on. But then he jumped back to the thing that I first was attracted to his writing about, which was the warnings about what was going on globally with the global governance model that I talk about on the show a lot. And he recently wrote a article about something I've talked about on the show that's coming up in September, the Summit of the Futures. And I think the American people and people worldwide really have to understand what is going on there and how fast it's moving. So, Derrick, why don't you tell my audience a little bit about the background of that and what is coming up and why you wrote this incredible article to inform the people?
Absolutely. So, you said it there. I mean, the whole reason I'm writing about this and we're talking about this today is because this is like many of the attacks we're facing, like the World Health Organization pandemic agreement, pandemic treaty, that a lot of people are aware of is coming up in just the next few weeks. This is another one of those attacks. You know, so many people know about the World Health Organization treaty because of the good work of journalists like yourself and myself and many other channels who've made sure that people are aware, people are expressing their disinterest in that whole thing, and different countries are pushing back. But there is a lot less attention and knowledge and information about the Summit of the Future, which, as you said, is going to take place this September 2024 in New York City for a couple of days. And it's part of the larger 79th United Nations General Assembly, which takes place for a full week or two in New York City. And for 2 days on September 22nd and 23rd, all the member states are going to be meeting for what they're calling the Summit of the Future, where they are discussing, where they're claiming they're going to sign something called the Pact for the Future, which obviously a pact is an agreement. It's a contract, if you will. And everything about this event, the further I've looked into it, which, just the name off the bat, Summit of the Future, tells you something about it, that, okay, they intend for this to be an important event. This isn't just another UN meeting where there's just going to be, talking and no action. I expect there are plans for some action. Doesn't mean, that on September 24th, there's going to be a worldwide police state per se, but absolutely we are witnessing the next steps, and maybe some of the biggest steps since COVID and then decades before that, since the 90s, when this whole climate agenda started in 1992 in Rio, Brazil. We're witnessing some of the biggest steps that we've seen in recent years towards world government. And that is absolutely, I spent days leading up to this article watching hours and hours of talks and presentations from the United Nations, from the World Economic Forum, from so many different associated organizations. We know they tend to kind of operate in this web where they write white papers and they have conferences with think tanks, and they're just slowly kind of putting out and seeding the ideas that they want to be in the public's consciousness. And then these ideas make their way to the UN, where this totally unelected body is working diligently to try to override not only national sovereignty, but individual sovereignty. So today, what I want to share with everybody as we get into this article that I wrote here is a little bit of the history. Where did this whole thing come from? We have some information about when this report started, and which led to the Summit of the Future call here, and what they're planning for after the Summit of the Future, because I've been doing some more research even since last week when I published this article, and it doesn't look good. It's everything we know. Of course, Agenda 2030, for those who are familiar with that, we're here in mid-2024. These people are working night and day to complete their radical transformation of the world and the economic system, the governance models, et cetera, by 2030. And all of these documents and these summits and these conferences are basically these United Nations members saying, we are going to recommit to Agenda 2030. We're going to leave no one behind. It's going to happen. And even more kind of strongly worded statements, making it clear that they intend to accomplish this on time. Like they're concerned that they're getting behind, and people, they're not accomplishing the SDGs. We've talked about that before with United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres saying that, we're not going to, the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, we're only on track to complete 20 or 30% of them, something like that. Well, this is all about them coming together and saying, like, we're going to recommit to them. We're going to put money into this, and we're going to push it like we never have before. And there's definitely some statements in here about evolving past national governance and rethinking governance models altogether.
Right. I do want people to understand on the White House website right now, if you go to September 2023, you look up Biden-Harris commitment to global goals and you read that. The first line says that they're recommitting to the Agenda 2030 that Barack Obama signed on into in 2015. And it goes on and on about how this is the future. This is what they're doing. And then they delineate the 17 development goals. If you don't know what they are, you think that they're just talking about education or they're talking about identification or they're talking about health. No, they're outlining all of the 17 goals, and in there somehow trillions of dollars going all to global groups. And they say it how this is a big win, but the truth is that they mean what they're saying. And I think, Derrick, a lot of people look at this stuff and they say, well, they don't mean it. Well, we've seen that they do. And like you brought up the white papers. So there's also a lot of these think tanks that are involved in DC that you and I both think should not exist, but they are all in on it too. And they're finding different pieces. And then a lot of the executive orders that have come out, especially things in the infrastructure bill as well, not executive orders, but things in the infrastructure bill and things in some of the other, the Inflation Reduction Act. There's a lot of stuff in there about ledger technology, biometric track and trace surveillance data, all this stuff that is leading us towards that. So I want people to, it's funny, I was on with Ian Davis the other day and he goes, well, it's really hard for them to say that it's conspiracy theory because that would denote that it's secret. He's like, none of this is secret. It's all out there. And you've done the hard work of proving it. And as I always say, the best part about your work is that you always bring the receipts. And when you show it, you say, this is their words, not mine. And I want people to really understand that. So take it away with exactly what we're dealing with. But I want people to understand that on the White House website, there is a commitment to this 2025, achieving Agenda 2030 by 2030, folks. And it's everywhere, in every town, in every neighborhood, in every state. So go ahead, because people are the only answer.
I agree. And Mel, just like I do, and I'm sure some in the audience, that a lot of, like you talked about the infrastructure bill and some of these other bills that have passed that are massive. And of course, nobody has time to read all of them. And that's where they like to hide the programs, including Agenda 2030 programs. And people who aren't familiar with it, it comes in the form of, our common agenda, our common future, the sustainable whatever committee, the resilience committee, the regenerative committee. A lot of these words on their own aren't bad inherently and don't mean bad things. It's a good thing to be regenerative. It's a good thing to be a resilient person. But we know that you have to be able to read, as I say in my article, kind of read past the globalist speak and the buzzwords to actually get to what their true meaning is. And I actually, as I was going through these documents more than ever, I really just had this moment of feeling like, I honestly think these people put things in the language of the exact opposite of what they mean.
Me too.
So it says like, we want to take care of all the kids and we want to have like this beautiful future. And I'm like, just thinking, okay, they want to control, it's hard not to look at it when you start to understand their words. I mean, and for those who have trouble with that, I know this isn't the first time this will be mentioned on your show, but you can go look at the Rockefeller's memoirs, David Rockefeller specifically, where he acknowledges, that he says there's some people who believe we're part of a global conspiracy to move towards world government. And if that's the charge, then I'm guilty as charged and, happy to be so. So it's like they don't deny any of this. And so this is why it's important to be able to understand, at least from my perspective, sort of the roots of these programs, because my goal is, as a journalist and just as an activist and individual, is waking up as many people as possible. Like, these people are working night and day, Summit of the Future and this thing and the SDG Summit. They're going to keep marching forward with their agenda. At the moment, we're too scattered of sort of conglomerated movements. We got freedom, truth, health, conspiracy, whatever you want to say, crypto people. A lot of people got pieces of the puzzle, got some of the truth, and some of us have a lot of the truth, but we need more, in my view, collaboration, cooperation, working together of these different, apparently, divided groups. We don't need to be that way, because these folks, the Trumps and the Clintons and other folks and the Obamas, like, they might not all get along with everything, which is obvious. But I think at the end of the day, at the elite level, the Rockefellers, Rothschilds, and way above them, those people see themselves much more in common than they do with us. They look at us like, beneath the dirt under their feet. So even if they don't agree with everything, they are capable of saying, you know what, let's work towards our bigger picture. Not only that, the long-term goals, working on goals that are going to outlive them. Like, that's something that they are pretty effective at, where they have us all sort of running the rat race and trying to just keep up with the day-to-day thing and then distract yourself with social media and clicks and likes and not planning at all, not thinking of the future. So I say all that to say that these people, their agendas are, the reason they are somewhat successful is because of how effectively they can put their differences aside and work together when it really comes to it. And I think that's something, a lesson that we could all use, is that we don't need to agree on everything to recognize that we've got some people working against the future and the freedom of humanity. And it behooves us all to find ways to work together if we're going to have any chance in diverting this. So, so this is all based on Agenda 2030, which folks will know was established by the United Nations in 2015. And that, of course, was originally built off what was called Agenda 21, the agenda for the 21st century. And then they kind of set the date 2030. This is when we want to. And you'll also see references, as you mentioned, Mel, to 2050. But by and large, like, they're aiming for this 2030 goal. And this comes, as I mentioned, that after Antonio Guterres in May of last year started saying that there was lacking of progress. He said only 12% of the SDGs were going to be completed, and 50% of the goals, there was, quote, weak and insufficient support. So they started floating this idea that we're getting behind. And this is sort of a pep rally, the Summit of the Future. It's going to be like a pep rally for the globalists to say, like, we need all the financial resources. We need all the commitment from everybody, every civil society, stakeholders. They love that term, of course, nation states, NGOs. And they said, and Antonio Guterres called for, quote, greater multilateral support. Multilateral, all that means is, that's another euphemism for one world government. They're talking, unilateral is a one nation kind of acting on its own, which obviously can have its own negative impacts, but they're talking about multilateral. They want it to sound like we're just working together, holding hands in one beautiful world, for the UN development system and for decisive action at the 2024 Summit of the Future. And he said, quote, this will be a moment of truth and of reckoning. It also must be a moment of hope when we unite to turn the tide and kickstart a new drive for the SDG achievement. So that was already going on 2023 last year. He starts saying these things, but it actually goes back to COVID 2020. June 2020 was a big month for the globalists. We can kind of see this with 4 years of hindsight now. June 2020 was when the World Economic Forum first announced their Great Reset agenda. They released Klaus Schwab's book, The Great Reset. And at that same time, the United Nations, June 2020, was marking the 75th anniversary of their creation. And with that 75th anniversary, some of the member states, the nation states, released this document, this declaration, and it called for the world governments to recommit to Agenda 2030, and it called on Antonio Guterres to come up with a plan, that like a realistic plan that they could use to achieve the goals. And this declaration, the 75th declaration of the UN, said, quote, we will leave no one behind. We are determined to implement the 2030 agenda in full and on time. There is no alternative. And so we can kind of start seeing the wheels moving. He responds in September 2021, Antonio Guterres, with this report called Our Common Agenda, which was basically taking all the suggestions from the UN 75th declaration. And that was the beginning of where we start hearing this talk of a summit for the future to, quote, forge a new global consensus on readying ourselves for a future that is rife with risks, but also opportunities. And that's when they start setting the date. And when you start looking at the Common Agenda report and some of the organizations associated with it, this is where you start to see the truth of what they're really calling for. Not only is it calling for strengthening a commitment to Agenda 2030, but accelerating the push towards world government. They also call for breathing new life into the multilateral system. Again, saying things like this is once in a generation opportunity. Multilateral governance is not adequate for today's complex, interconnected, rapidly changing world. So that's the other thing they keep trying to sell, is that getting the other nation states and the people, of those of us who are paying attention, to think like, we need to go beyond. COVID proved the system's broken, right? We need a great reset. We need better governance forms. And the nation state, it's, that was all back in 1940s when the UN first started. We need something new. We need this discussion even of a UN 2.0. There's one section on this document about the Summit of the Future called What Would It Deliver? That discusses what is, what's going to come. And it says, quote, UN 2.0 is about upgraded expertise and innovation, data, digital foresight, and behavioral science to enhance the UN system results, help build similar member state expertise, and to accelerate shared progress towards the SDGs. So we're just really seeing this call for UN 2.0, This other section is called a global financial system that works for all. Again, they like to use this like it's all happy and everybody's holding hands. But the truth of the matter, and this is what it's really about, a transformed international financial architecture that they say is inclusive, blah, 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 representative, resilient, all those usual words. But this is what they're calling for. So we should expect that at the Summit of the Future, as we're getting closer, that they're going to be calling for what is often called the Bretton Woods moment, which is reference to the beginning of the IMF back in the 1940s, when they first started the International Monetary Fund at the Bretton Woods Conference. Well, there's been calls from the UN, from the World Economic Forum, and others for years now saying, and from the head of the IMF saying, we need a new Bretton Woods moment. I reported also that in June 2023 in France, Emmanuel Macron, the president there, he held what they called the Summit for the New Global Financing Pact. So this is just, it's like each of their documents builds on top of the other. And then it seems to be kind of marching towards the Summit of the Future. On the United Nations website, they even have a roadmap that started with a couple of years ago, the UN meeting, then the SDG Summit in 2023. And it's like, it shows that they're clearly putting a lot of importance on this summit. And there's discussion of using or invoking Article 109 of the UN Charter, which is one of the only ways to actually change the UN Charter, which is essentially the United Nations Constitution. It seems like the globalists want that, of course, to eventually be some world constitution. Right. And so there is clearly an effort by some of the players here to use the Summit of the Future to call for a new global international financial system, to call for a UN 2.0, to call just for recommitment and speeding up the process of completing the Agenda 2030 goals in the next 6 years.
Now, we have a few great clips from the Jimmy Dore Show with guest Whitney Webb.
So here's your article, Manufacturing Consent, the Border Fiasco, and the Smart Wall. The political response to the crisis at the southern border continues to advance the bipartisan Smart Wall. Having been backed by Trump and Biden alike, this bipartisan consensus reaches far beyond the United States as much as the world is similarly speeding along in implementing digital borders. The disastrous situation in the U.S.-Mexico border has been intentionally produced. We've been saying that at this show for at least a year. Throughout the last several administrations, regardless of campaign and other public rhetoric, the porous nature of the border has remained unresolved. On several occasions, the situation as it has developed has been blamed largely on incompetence and government inefficiency. Though some administrations have been tougher than others in regard to terrestrial migration under some metrics, the U.S.-Mexico border has not been sealed off, so to force entrants to cross through officially recognized and managed ports of entry. Under the current administration, it has been pointedly obvious that even the sections of the border that do contain physical barriers are being dismantled on purpose. All the while, illegal crossings have risen to unprecedented levels. Whatever the motives for this deliberate policy on the part of the Biden administration, the end result has been the widespread characterization of the crisis as an invasion, priming the voter bloc, usually most concerned with border security, the American right, for military-style solutions. So let me bring in Whitney. Whitney, tell me what are these solutions that we're going to actually end up getting?
Well, this is another one of those solutions that was actually what they tried to do after 9/11 under the George W. Bush administration. During that time, it was being run by the newly created DHS. It was called SBI Net. But the idea was to have this basically a surveillance wall, a smart wall, instead of an actual physical barrier, and that this was going to be cheaper and more secure. And of course, the contractors that had it, I think it was Boeing, and another one ended up spending, $1 bazillion and producing nothing. And so the project was kind of quasi-scrapped. And then comes in this company called Anduril, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, or rather the people behind it, Palmer Luckey and Trey Stevens, who were both intimately tied to Peter Thiel, the American billionaire PayPal co-founder, and Palantir co-founder, who's a lot of ties to, American intelligence. These are the people producing the modern smart wall, and have been building a lot of these biometric towers. This has been something that since the early 2000s has also been very heavily supported by the Democratic Party. And Trump is also a big supporter as well, at least as of 2019. So a few years after he was president, he reneged on the idea of what he started to call a medieval border wall, and we should all move to the smart wall. So the smart wall, the idea is to have this biometric entry exit tracking system, not just on the terrestrial borders, but in airports and really every port of entry. And this is something that is happening not just in the US, it's something that's being rolled out in seeming lockstep throughout the entire world, particularly the Western world. The European Union begins it this year. The UK is poised to roll it out next year. And there's a major effort, I would argue right now, to manufacture consent for the same system in the United States. But this is really not something that's even though it's being marketed to U.S. conservatives, this is really a policy agenda that's coming from an institution that conservatives tend not to like, which is the United Nations. It's part of SDG 16, Sustainable Development Goal, which the implementing partner of which is Interpol, which is sort of like the global policing organization. And as part of its role in implementing the UN's Agenda 2030, Interpol created something called the Global Policing Goals. And those involve creating this system globally where every entry and exit into every country is managed by a biometric digital ID system that essentially Interpol controls at the global level. So this is being rolled out in all these different countries that have all signed on to the global policing goals of Interpol. And also, the UN SDG policy agenda. And it's being marketed to the United States right now as the only way to stop, mass migration. But as you read, and I noted in my article, this is something that's been really allowed to happen because the US-Mexico border has been porous for a very long time. There have been migration issues there for a very long time. Even when Trump was in office, the border was never sealed off. No one's ever sealed it off. And you could argue that because Democrats support this same policy agenda, they've created the exact conditions to sort of sell this or have the opposing side of the uniparty sell this to their base. But a lot of times the government frames stuff they intentionally do as incompetence.
Yes.
And this is not a case of incompetence. If they wanted to shut down the border, they could. But also, I think there's been a lot of anxiety generated about the border situation by the media, and not just mainstream media, but also alternative media, by framing it as an invasion and with all this sorts of militaristic language and basically calling for either the smart wall or some other sort of military style solution, which, is not good. When you give that kind of power to the US government, regardless of what party is in power, let's remember that it's a uniparty at the end of the day.
Yes.
They trample on people's civil liberties.
So,
they did it during COVID. They did it after 9/11 and everywhere in between. So to think that giving them military style power to stop mass migration, which they've allowed to happen, is going to change anything is absurd.
So they've invented a problem so they can implement a solution they wanted to have for a long time. And so that's why we see this. So this makes sense now. I hear you say it comes from the UN. And even though you say it's appealing to the people who are on the right in America because they want to have the border closed down, but it's coming from the UN, and so we've also noticed at this show that this isn't an American problem, this immigration problem. This is all over the Western world. This is happening in Germany, it's happening in Scotland, France, the UK. So I've been saying that this is intentional. And we've been trying to figure out, there's lots, I think, of different reasons, but certainly one of the reasons is so they can implement this biometrics kind of surveillance, right?
Yeah, and honestly, some of the bigger names in alternative media commentary, and especially in right-leaning independent media, have been promoting the smart wall as a direct consequence of this heightened anxiety about the border situation. For example, you had Brett Weinstein go on Tucker Carlson saying we need a smart wall. You had Colonel Douglas McGregor saying we need a smart wall. And I'm sure it's more than just them. So,
and so do you think do you think that's them just being desperate for a solution and not really knowing the bigger game that's being played?
I mean, that I'm not going to say that I know what's in their brains because I don't. But if you're someone like Brett Weinstein, who made a name for yourself being a big COVID critic, and you can't see that how this directly ties into the digital ID agenda that you're supposedly against, I don't know. Maybe he should rethink that.
Okay, well, I will try to get Brett on, and I will try to ask him about that and use my influence with him, which is, I don't know how much I have with him, but he seems to me like a guy who's not he's not a schemer. He seems that he cares about things, and I think that this border crisis is so overwhelming because it was intended. This is intentionally happened, as you wrote in your article, and people are. I mean, I had Dennis Kucinich on, right? So Dennis Kucinich couldn't be a bigger lefty, and Dennis Kucinich, I said, "What do you think about the border?" And I thought he was going to say, well, these are good people. We need to, immigration's good and blah, blah. And he just goes, we have to seal the border. Just like that. He said, we have to seal the border. And so he didn't tell me how he wanted to do it, but I wonder if he's on board with this digital or electronic bullshit. And it's being sold to everybody as the answer to these porous borders that they have intentionally made happen. And it goes all the way back to Gaddafi, right? So one of the things that Gaddafi did was kept the immigration from Africa from going into Europe, and he thought that gave him protection, right? But no, they wanted to get rid of him because they wanted all that shit to happen. Isn't this kind of amazing that they're doing? So this is like the WEF kind of a thing. This is the handful of billionaires that actually run things. You keep mentioning them left and right, and they don't care about countries. It's like that speech from Network in 1973. There are no countries. There's only companies.
A college of corporations.
And the international transfer of dollars. And that's all this is about. And so if they have to wreck your country, your border, your culture, right? If they have to completely flood your culture with people from other cultures, and so you are no longer have a culture, they don't give a shit about that, and that's what's happening all over the Western world right now. And the what I try to warn people against is don't blame the immigrants, right? That's the distraction, right? Yeah, the problem is the people implementing this policy. Joe Biden, not only at the border, he's literally putting immigrants on planes and flying them into the United States and turning them loose in America, and then they go to New York City and they get a credit card for $1,000 a month, as we have people living under every bridge in America. So this is the chaos. Always favors the establishment, create chaos, and then you have people beg for authoritarian solutions, which is what you're talking about right here, and that's why you see people like maybe Brett Weinstein and those others asking, because that's what they've done. They've made us desperate. They've made us afraid of chaos. They want us to have some kind of order and safety, and they know exactly what we have the solution for you. Here's your solution. It's ultimate surveillance and control of your currency. Right?
Yeah. So the idea is to sell ultimate safety and security to people, but basically what you're going to get is prison. Because in prison, you have a roof over your head, you have food brought to you. Life is easy, right?
Yes.
It's super convenient. They watch everything you do and whatever, and you don't have freedom of movement. But no one can get you in there. I mean, the idea is to get us to trade as much of our liberty as possible for security, but it's really the illusion of security because we'll have neither, because literal government, our entire government is run by organized crime.
It seems like the whole Western world is run just by straight up criminals and con men.
Yeah.
I mean, from Justin Trudeau to obviously Joe Biden, but there's and that people think that. Now, do these group of people, are they also opposed to Donald Trump? Because I know the establishment donor class in the United States is opposed to Donald Trump because he won't do exactly everything they want him to do. He does most of it. So, would you surmise that these people also don't want Donald Trump, or how would you look at it?
Well, Reid Hoffman is a big funder of sort of Democrat causes and the Democrats, but other members of the quote unquote PayPal mafia are very much supportive of Trump. For example, Peter Thiel was a big force on Trump's transition team. People that worked very closely for Thiel and Thiel's Palantir basically directed all the early policy decisions and appointments of Trump's Department of Defense. And there's been a lot of connections, I think, still between PayPal mafia and Trump. And you have someone like Elon Musk also sort of posturing publicly anyway as a libertarian and sort of in that right populist camp. So I think this particular network has people who sort of play to both sides of the political machine, which is frankly, if you want to get lots of lucrative government contracts, I mean, that's what you do,
Yeah. Oh, definitely. So, so where do you see all this ending up in 5 or 10 years? Where do you, are you good at that? Can you make a prediction?
I mean, I can try, because frankly, it's hard to know where we will be, but I think it's pretty clear that there's certain efforts to push people in a particular direction. So I think it's been clear for a long time, and as I'm sure you're aware, there's a push to onboard everyone to a digital ID system. Vaccine passports during COVID were a big part of this. But there's been all sorts of pushes for it. For example, WorldCoin, Sam Altman, scan your eyeball, get a unique digital ID in a wallet you can have tokens in. People in the global South that they're basically being bribed to give up their biometric data for the guy that runs OpenAI with Microsoft and stuff. There's these digital ID initiatives are consistently tested on vulnerable stateless people, but the goal is to have it rolled out globally and to have it be interfaced with a digital wallet where the money is programmable and surveillable. So a lot of people have been talking about CBDCs, central bank issued digital currency. But there's also going to be digital currencies just as surveillable and programmable that are issued by the private sector and the Wall Street banks. And that isn't being talked about enough. Right. So one of the stable coins I mentioned earlier that people in Argentina are being rapidly onboarded to because their currency is being destroyed, Tether recently onboarded the FBI and Secret Service to its platform.
Jesus.
So everyone that uses Tether gets to use their money under the watchful eye of American intelligence, essentially. And those same actors, the FBI and the Secret Service, are part of this public-private partnership housed within the World Economic Forum. It's basically U.S., Israeli, and UK intelligence, plus a lot of big banks and PayPal. Their ambition is to end online anonymity, and with that, also financial anonymity. So we're seeing unprecedented crackdowns on, financial privacy tools, both for cryptocurrency and for regular transactions, and big pushes from all across the internet, really, to have you tie your government issued ID to what you do online, whether it's your social media account or really anything. And so the goal here is to have, create a completely surveillable system based on biometrics and with money that the government or whoever can directly program and surveil. So programming it means that you can only use the money for what they say you can use it for, and you can only send it to who they say you can send it to.
So,
and all of
so
that.
If people, are having a hard time wrapping their heads around this, so what this is they're just going to make it easier to do to everybody what they did to the trucker protest in Canada. And
yeah, I think a lot of that was, trials to see how much pushback they'll actually get for this kind of stuff. I mean, the goal is to onboard the whole world onto that. And they consistently test this stuff first in a global South. So on the global South. So what this article is about is a big effort to essentially wrap up a significant amount of Latin America by focusing at the subnational level, the local level, onto these kinds of systems under the guise of we must decarbonize now.
Yeah.
But really if you look at sort of like the fine print, I guess you could say, of this program, the decarbonization funds go toward a specific company that's tied up with this particular group that's trying to build an intercontinental power smart grid from the Americas, and they've been testing their smart grid in poor communities in Latin America, in Los Angeles, actually, in the US, and also in Colombia and some other countries, with the idea of having it all tied together and having energy be currency. And the idea is to move away from currency as we know it now and have all these commodity-backed currencies, and that people trade energy or trade carbon credits. And basically, it's complicated. There's a lot of different reasons for why they're moving in that direction. Part of it is because of the insane amount of debt that the world is saddled with. You have to park that debt in certain places. You have to find ways to manage it, right? And so, some of these stable coins are being used for that. Carbon credits are being used for that. Actually, RFK's vice president, Nicole Shanahan, was running or managing a project at Stanford Law that was about using carbon credits to facilitate quantitative easing, which is, the endless money printing by the Federal Reserve. So there's been a lot of, efforts to look at what they're going to do with the debt, and essentially they have to remake the financial system, but they're, making it in a way where it's, completely surveillable and controllable. And these are really the ambitions that the U.S. national security state had right after 9/11 and tried to impose on everybody. Total information awareness, for example, was a program that they tried to enact. There was a big uproar about it at the time in like 2003, 2004, because even the New York Times and stuff knew that it was going to completely eliminate privacy for the average American. And so the ambition of this program was to surveil literally everything, including people's like health signals, to prevent pandemics before they can happen, to prevent financial crime before it can happen, to prevent terrorist attacks before it can happen. It's pre-crime.
Pre-crime.
And Total Information Awareness was recreated as a private company in 2004, right after Congress defunded it, and it's provably Palantir, which is Peter Thiel's company that contracts to every single U.S. intelligence agency. They privatized it because they realized if they can frame it as a private company, people won't complain. People will give their data freely to the private company. So Peter Thiel doesn't just make Palantir, he also makes Facebook. And they build this network of companies. And now Palantir, for years, has been testing predictive policing in urban communities in the United States, really testing it all over the world now. And I'm kind of concerned they're going to make a very big comeback with Trump, because some of the main people in developing those policies for Palantir, when Trump was in office last time, they were very intimately tied up and served in the Trump administration. People like Trey Stevens, for example. And Trey Stevens created a company with the Oculus Rift guy, the VR headset guy, Palmer Luckey, that used to work, that got, thanks to Peter Thiel, sold his company to Facebook, and then got more Thiel funding. They're building the smart wall for Democrats and Trump, because Trump doesn't want an actual physical wall anymore. He's all in on the smart wall. And on a recent campaign stop said, we need a biometric entry exit tracking system for everyone. That's how we're going to stop, illegal migration and all of that. And one of his campaign lawyers is going on podcasts saying we need to use biometric face scanning to vote as voter ID. We need to scan our eyeballs. Woman? Yeah, Alina Habba.
Okay. All right. So I think we have actually a story loaded up to talk about the wall. So let me stop you here.
Sorry.
Let me stop you here for a second before we get into that. And let me just ask you. Go ahead.
To summarize, then, really quick. Basically, the goal is pre-crime. And that's why they want to eliminate financial privacy and privacy in general online, and know everything you do.
So this is like when I was in high school, I read the Brave New World and 1984. This is like both of those things.
Sure.
Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, the goal. So take people like Larry Fink, for example. Larry Fink is on record saying markets like totalitarian governments.
Correct.
Markets like dictatorships. That is why in the 1980s and the 70s, the CIA imposed military dictatorships on Latin America, because that's what the market liked. Because they, the whole idea of like the Reagan administration, for example, and other administrations too, but like when a lot of these coups were happening and these military dictatorships were being propped up, that's who was in power. They wanted certain economic policies imposed on those populations in Latin America. And they didn't want interference for the CIA to do drug running in Colombia and these other countries. Of course, Bush Sr., when he was CIA director, was very involved in all of that. And so in order to get, people who will be amenable to those policy decisions that are in the interests of the CIA, but not their national interests, you have to impose authoritarian governments, right? That's why you had them back people like Manuel Noriega, Pinochet in Chile. I mean, really, the entire continent was pretty much in dictatorship or in a state of brutal war. And I think there's a big goal here to have U.S. empire really clamp down on Latin America for this new, global turf war between the West and BRICS and whatnot. The U.S. doesn't plan to have the dollar die and be dethroned. They plan to bring it back in a very significant way with these dollar-denominated stable coins. And other tools they have at their disposal as well. So to think that like the bankers in Wall Street are just going to like drift off into the night without a fight, these guys have been saddling countries around the world in debt for a very long time. They're remaking policies from either at the UN or at the, the World Bank, IMF levels. These institutions have enormous influence. And they have every intention to keep the debt slavery model going, but because of economic realities, they have to reinvent that system, and that's what we're seeing right now.
Now, let's take a look at this week's episode of New World Next Week with James Corbett and James Evan Pilato.
Welcome back to New World Next Week. I'm James Corbett of CorbettReport.com.
And I am James Evan Pilato of MediaMonarchy.com. There was nothing consensual about this conduct. We have got that story, plus death by medicine, but first, faceless people, invisible hands. New Army video aims to lure recruits for psychological operations. Ironic dateline location for this Associated Press story, Fort Liberty. The video is unsettling, with haunting images of faceless people, fire, and soldiers. The voiceover is a cascade of... I wish I could do the voiceovers for these things. The voiceover is a cascade of recognizable historical voices as the screen pulses cryptic messages touting the power of words, ideas, and invisible hands. Hints of its origin are tucked into frames as they flash by. Psy-War. All caps. The Army psychological warfare soldiers are using their brand of mental combat to bring in what the service needs, recruits. And if you find the video intriguing, you may be the Army's target audience as it works to enlist soldiers to join its Special Operations Command. The video is the second provocative recruiting ad that in itself exemplifies the kind of work PSYOP soldiers do to influence public opinion and wage the war of words overseas. Called Ghost in the Machine 2, it's coming out 2 years, basically to the day, after the inaugural video quietly posted on the unit's YouTube site generated a firestorm of online chatter. It's a recruiting video, said the Army major who created it, speaking with the Associated Press before the release. So the Associated Press isn't reacting and jumping on and reporting a story. They obviously knew this was coming. Someone who watches it and thinks, wow, that was effective. How was it constructed? That's the kind of creative mindset we're looking for. We will include the link to Ghost in the Machine 2. Don't give it thumbs up and certainly don't subscribe to it. The second PSYOP recruiting video is here and it will blow your mind. Taskandpurpose.com warns us, and we will, of course, include the link to your classic You Are Being Gamed. James, is it bad I didn't actually watch this Brainwash before we were talking about it here?
You know what? I'm going to say no, it isn't bad. Because although we always exhort people to go to the show notes, we're putting all the links in. Go read these articles for yourself. There's more information there. Dig it up. Put these pieces together for yourself. In this case in particular, I would say that actually subjecting yourself to this propaganda is doing their work for them. Because the entire point of this is to get into your mind, to make it cool about the, cool PsyOps operations that these PsyOps warriors are doing. And you could be part of this and manipulating people en masse. And isn't it so great? Of course, this is all of the disinformation, misinformation spreader idea that they're demonizing when it's regular civvies, but when it's the military doing it, man, that's so cool and awesome, and you could be one of these great hero warriors, which is laughable because whenever you hear from people who have been in intelligence or worked with intelligence or brushed up against intelligence or PsyOps or what have you, they always say that the whole James Bond macho swashbuckling image of these jet-setting debonair people is just laughable because intelligence and PsyOps agents tend to be the most plain, boring people imaginable. But beyond that, I think what this story really gestures to. So I would say I did subject myself to this, and it is exactly what you would expect it to be. It's all the, we're so cool and manipulating things, exactly like the previous iteration of this PsyOp recruitment campaign that they launched a couple of years ago. But I would say that this is the perfect underlying example of exactly what I was talking about just recently on my podcast on how to save the world, where the they, them, those absolutely 100% know the most powerful weapon in the world. They know how to manipulate your mind by getting into it with well-crafted narratives to manipulate your perceptions. The entire point of a video like this is to manipulate you. And to a certain extent, even us just sitting here talking about it is playing into their hands. We are giving our time, our attention, our energy, our focus to them and what they are trying to implant into us. So the flip side of that, the hopeful side of it, is we can take our time, energy, and attention and focus it where we want. And that is really, I think, the thing that we should take out of a story like this one.
James, I imagine, having not watched it, that it looks like some Tom Clancy Super Soldier video game trailer, I would imagine. And as the advice goes in many of these situations, as was said on The Simpsons those many decades ago, just don't look. Just don't look. Or, of course, like I like from Raiders of the Lost Ark, don't look at it, Marion. It's going to melt your face if you play along with this thing. So, James, do you remember, I'm going to ask anybody, do they remember the so-called woke CIA ads from what was about 3 years ago? The internet comes together to mock the CIA's new woke ad, May 4th, 2021. May? It's almost like they put all these out on May Day on purpose or something. Forbes wrote about it. The advert plays like a razor-sharp parody, funnier than any SNL skit, a cynical blend of progressive buzzwords that the creators of South Park would likely compose as a throwaway gag. The idea of the CIA putting on a friendly face is inherently amusing. Even a quick scroll through Wikipedia reveals some mind-blowing atrocities committed by the agency that make the fever dreams of conspiracy theories look lucid. In hindsight, perhaps the real problem with MKUltra was the lack of diversity. As a gay two-spirit furry of color, the CIA really welcomed me, James. I played a bunch of the clips on my show. So now they're basically in my radio rotation. So you'll be listening to some cool music and you'll hear some weird woke ad from the CIA. Sometimes they're just blind, but it's just this exploitative series of commercials they did a couple of years ago. And this strikes me as kind of a same piece, if you will. That's how we get going on this New World Next Week, episode 553. Our second story, this just in, prescription drugs are the third leading cause of death. This interesting, writing from Peter C. Gulci. And again, of course, like you said, we've always got the links in there. Overtreatment with drugs kills many people and the death rate is increasing. It is therefore strange that we've allowed this long-lasting drug pandemic to continue, and even more so because the drug deaths are easily preventable. In 2013, I estimated that our prescription drugs are the third leading cause of death after heart disease and cancer, and in 2015, that psychiatric drugs alone are also the third leading cause of death. However, in the United States, it is commonly stated that our drugs are only the fourth leading cause of death, Estimate derived from a 1998 meta-analysis of 39 U.S. studies of where monitors recorded all adverse drug reactions that occurred while the patients were in hospital, or which were the reason for hospital admission. The methodology clearly underestimates drug deaths. Most people who are killed by drugs die outside of hospitals, and the time spent in hospitals was only 11 days on average in the meta-analysis. Moreover, that meta-analysis only included patients who died from drugs that were properly prescribed, not those who died as a result from errors in the drug administration, noncompliance, overdose, drug abuse, and not deaths where the adverse drug reaction was only possible. Many people die because of errors, e.g. simultaneous use of contraindicted... Wow, that's a new one on me, James. Contraindicted drugs, I'll have to look that one up, and many possible drug deaths are real. Moreover, most of the included studies are very old, the median publication year being 1973, and drug deaths have increased dramatically over the last 50 years. 37,309 drug deaths reported to the FDA in 2006, 123,927 10 years later, which is a 3.3 times as many. In hospital records and coroner reports, deaths linked to prescription drugs often considered to be from natural or unknown causes. This misconception is particularly common for deaths caused by psychiatric drugs. Even when young patients with schizophrenia suddenly drop dead, it's called a natural death. It's not natural to die young. The notice of liability delivered to individuals at the World Health Organization this week, James, so you're going to have to explain this one to me. The text of the notice of liability delivered to Tedros and the gang, re notice upon harm and to cease and desist. Now, what this made me think of, James, way back before the scamdemic, medical error was the third leading cause of death. Search medical error, third leading cause of death, and when you search that, you'll find some of those 2018, 2019 articles, but like they like to do, it's all been covered up with 2021 articles of them going, nuh-uh. And never forget, James, I don't know if you know this one, beloved actor Bill Paxton, game over, man, game over, and you're stewed buttwad. Bill Paxton was killed by a surgeon in 2017, and his family just settled the case for a measly $1 million. Now, I'll ask you, have you noticed, and maybe I was noticing it longer than it was consciously a realization, just the normalization of everybody on meds the last 30 years?
In my personal life, I'm glad to say not so much, and I don't know if that's because I'm not American or because maybe people just don't like to talk about what meds they're on. Either way, I haven't noticed it as much in my personal life, but obviously given the work that we do and the type of reporting that we do, I have certainly seen the normalization of, well, everybody's on some kind of meds at this point, right? And I have talked about this before, so if people are interested, they can go back through the Corbett Report archives on my work on SSRIs and other types of pharmaceuticals that are being given out to children like candies. In the interest of big pharma, of course. And that's, I think, the underlying issue here is the undoubted takeover of all of the regulatory agencies and all of those things. Stewarding over your health are really just different arms of big pharma at this point. So no surprise there. Well, the universe has been restored to its balance, James, because here is another example of a story where, once again, yes, I do exhort people to go and read through this entire article. It is voluminous. It is extremely well referenced and researched, and it has a lot of statistics and figures in there. But basically, long story short, when you break it down, this Peter Gotchi writer is pointing to all of the various problems that arise in trying to arrive at a number of how many people are killed by various medications. And there are a number of different factors that go into it, and he describes them quite well and talks about the various studies that have been done, but why they're probably underestimating, or in some cases, maybe overestimating deaths. And there's a lot of care and consideration that goes into this. But one of the underlying factors is one of the reasons we don't have a hard underlying final total number for the number of people, say, who have been killed by psychiatric medications is because whose interest does it serve to actually come up with such a number? Certainly not Big Pharma, who, by the way, is sponsoring a lot of the research that would go into finding out such a number anyway. So there's a lot of cynicism to spread around with regards to this story. With regards to the notice of liability story, I just thought that's an interesting follow-up to what I was just talking about on Solutions Watch, suing the tyrants. And I did raise this the specter of this legal document, this notice of liability, where instead of trying to sue some sort of amorphous general organization, no, filing a notice of liability against specific individuals. Your actions are causing harm. You will be held personally, criminally responsible for the behavior you are engaging in. And I think that's an interesting tactic. I don't know how successful it will be. I'm not exactly expecting to see Tedros in an orange jumpsuit anytime soon, unfortunately. But it is an interesting story and one that I'll be looking into and seeing if there's any follow-up to it.
I guess I really noticed it. And both these places are back in Portland, Oregon. At the grocery store, most of my coworkers were all fit, awesome, alternative, anti-pharma, healthy, rad people. Then at the commercial FM radio station, of which most of the employees, this was part of my sadness of the realization of getting hired there, it's mostly sales departments. How much everybody all just talked about at the water cooler. Oh, well, you're on Zibble's lamb? Well, you got to balance it out with the Slabble. And it was just like, it was what they talked about. What are you doing? It was like, this is my organic milk and coffee that I brought from home. I'm going to go back to the conspiracy show because I'm crazy. And by the way, James, I think we have to mention, as long as we're talking about the disease industry, AstraZeneca admits their jabs cause harm and are pulling them from the market. That is news from the last 24 hours. I talk about it on my Morning Monarchy. AstraZeneca withdrawing COVID vaccine worldwide. Finally, on this New World Next Week episode 533, man, when I first heard this news, James, it really struck me. It's like, man, him and America's dad must really have some dirt on some people. But Courtney Love tried to warn us. Harvey Weinstein will be retried in New York after rape conviction overturned. Mayday from Reuters. Former Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein will be retried in New York, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office said in court, a week after the state's highest court threw out his 2020 rape conviction. Weinstein appeared in court before Judge Curtis Farber in a wheelchair in a black suit more than 4 years after his conviction was hailed as a milestone for the Me Too movement, in which women accused hundreds of men in entertainment, media, politics, and other fields of sexual misconduct. There was nothing consensual about this conduct, prosecutor Nicole Blumberg said. We believe in this case and will be retrying this case. Weinstein, 72, was serving a 23-year sentence in a prison in upstate Rome, New York. He has been transferred to Bellevue Hospital in Manhattan. Farber remanded Weinstein back into custody and said he expects to hold a new trial, sometime after Labor Day, which is September 2nd. Weinstein remained silent during the court hearing. In February 2020, if you forget, as things are getting pretty wild around that time, jurors in Manhattan convicted Weinstein of sexually assaulting former production assistant Miriam Haley in 2006 and of raping actress Jessica Mann in 2013. They were among the more than 80 women who have accused Weinstein of sexual misconduct. The conviction included charges of first-degree sexual assault and third-degree rape. Weinstein, who has denied having non-consensual sexual encounters with anyone, was acquitted on other charges. Haley's attorney, Gloria Allred, which kind of shines a bad... I guess Benjamin Crump was probably busy already chasing ambulances. Gloria Allred told reporters she's not decided whether she'll testify again at trial, saying, of course, it was traumatizing. That testimony was obviously believed by a jury, and in addition, Mimi's testimony was not the only evidence presented, which gets into a little bit of the problem. Last week, the New York Court of Appeals found that Judge James Burke, who presided over the trial, made a critical mistake by allowing 3 women to testify about alleged sexual assaults by Weinstein that were not part of the criminal charges against him. Whoopsie, I planted a poison pill we could use later if we need. The court said that this prior bad acts testimony violated his right to a fair trial. Weinstein sentenced to 16 years following his separate rape trial in California. The 2 sentences cannot be served concurrently, and California gives law prosecutors wider latitude to introduce prior bad acts, more so than New York does. Burke is no longer on the bench, conveniently. What is he, probably chilling on a beach in Tel Aviv with Epstein? So any New York retrial would be before a different judge. Weinstein, of course, co-founded the Miramax Film Studio, whose hit movies included Shakespeare in Love, the movie everyone believes bought its shock Best Picture Oscar, and Pulp Fiction. from a director who would later be accused of abusing some of his actresses. His own eponymous film studio, Miramax, or rather Weinstein Studios, filed for bankruptcy in March 2018. So, of course, it's media monarchy. I went over a lot of this on my morning show, Harvey Weinstein's rape conviction overturned in New York. But James, like I said, invoking America's dad, that's what they used to call Bill Cosby. This all kind of seems to follow a trend. Bill Cosby, freed from prison, sex conviction overturned, June 30th, 2021. Porn star Ron Jeremy's 34 criminal counts have officially all been dismissed, April 3rd, 2024. And most recently, woman who accused Dodgers pitcher Trevor Bauer of sexual assault, indicted for fraud. She concocted a giant scheme. Now, these are all very different cases. They are not all one thing by any stretch. But is this, James, is this the pendulum swinging back the other way? Even makes me think of like protests and voting. Y'all had a good time. Yeah, yes, all menning and stuff. But the accusations were made in a lot of ways on Instagram and not in the courts of law. But it's like, yeah, it's like voting. We'll let you do all this, but it's not going to actually change anything unless you stop giving your money and enabling abusers. James, was Me Too a thing in Japan?
Yeah, there were a few prominent cases here that gave rise to what people were calling a Japanese Me Too movement. Whether it really manifested in such is debatable, but there have been a few high-profile cases, and unsurprisingly, because, yes, sexual assault and rape of young people in industries in vulnerable positions happens in Japan and presumably in every other country on the planet as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of different issues swirling around here, and I would just say that I understand the sort of the legal complexities of trying what is essentially a crime of being in someone's mind. Was this consensual or not consensual? And how do you sort that out in a judicial system after the fact? It's going to be a messy process, and it's not always going to have happy results for everyone. So, I mean, there's a lot of nuance here. I would just say generally, yes, I am against sexual assault and rape and you exploiting people in various industries, and not just women. One of the stories that came out here in Japan in the past couple of years, shades of Jimmy Savile, the Johnny Kitagawa, who was the head of Johnny's, this boy band maker, stalwart of the music industry here in Japan, died, I think, a couple of years ago. And as it turns out, all of those rumors and even that article that was written about him decades ago about him raping the young boys, well, it turns out maybe that was true. And now there's all this new evidence that has come out since his death about this. So it happens to young men and young women in positions of vulnerability, and presumably always has, and hopefully won't always, but how do we go about solving that? And I get how this plays into the culture war side of things, and I get how the conspiratainment side of it would be to look for the, no, Weinstein was innocent, I tell ya. Cosby was innocent. All those women were lying. I don't think that's necessarily the right maneuver here. I'm certainly not going to come out Team Weinstein. Yay. He was such a great guy. But the real question is in the weaponization and the use of these allegations. Why are certain people brought to trial for this and other people aren't? Why, for example, Weinstein, Cosby, but not Biden, Clinton? You know, why are they shielded from the Me Too accusations is really the question that we should be asking in this case. Anyway, there's a lot of nuance here, but it's interesting to watch these things playing out in the courts and then people's responses to them.
Well, and I guess Epstein and Maxwell, they were pimping girls to nobody. James, I think there's a new sort of documentary series, and I think there's new allegations contained therein about Kevin Spacey, who of course was photographed with Ghislaine Maxwell, allegedly sitting on some of the thrones in Buckingham Palace. And speaking of not watching the gross things, no, I didn't watch the video of the dude burning himself down a couple of weeks ago. And I haven't watched the gnarly new Quiet on Set documentary series about all the abuse happening to kids on Nickelodeon TV shows back in the day. James, Terry Crews, the actor, Creus, big, tough, funny, hilarious black dude, he came out and said, I was abused. I was sexually assaulted in my career, and people kind of laugh at him. There's a lot, of course, going on here and much too much to get into, but I will include the link. Courtney Love on the red carpet in 2005 was asked, Courtney, do you have any advice for girls trying to break into Hollywood? And she even goes, I'll get libel sued for this. But if Harvey Weinstein invites you to a private party at the Four Seasons, don't go. Hoy. That is, there's the New World Next Week sigh. That was the natural, real one. That is New World Next Week, episode 553. One actually hidden last clutch of old logo Corbett Report shirts. We found a few more in the warehouse, so go double check again. If you maybe thought your size was sold out, it might not be, and there might be a few more in there. And again, this is the old Corbett Report logo. So again, instant collector's item, James. Also, I forget to remind people, I play the exclusive audio of these New World Next Week episodes again. We tape these Wednesday evening to me, and of course it takes us a little while to get this produced. Huge thanks, as always, to video editor Brock West. But I play the exclusive audio after my Thursday Morning Monarchy show before it is published anywhere. Only me and Corbett and James and maybe sometimes CastBot has heard it. I think that's one of the great ways to kind of get people over to listen to, again, what is a free, commercial-free broadcast that is for adults only at MediaMonarchy.com/listen. James, there it is.
Yes, thank you to Brock for the excellent video editing he does. Thank you to CastBot over at the Media Monarchy store for keeping things running there. Thank you to you, James, for the Media Monarchy stream that you do every day. I hope people are checking it out. And thank you, most importantly, to all the people who tune in every week and make all of this possible. So on that note of thanks, do it again next week. Talk to you then.
Thanks, buddy. Take care.
Thanks again to Steve and the AM Wake Up crew for having us on their channel. Please support their hard work to keep their channel going. One of the biggest ways to help is to share their show, so please share it. Now, are some clips from this week's episodes. Enjoy.
And I will admit that from time to time, Hotspot doesn't always get it right, but this does seem to be corroborated footage on a number of different accounts. So let's pull this up and take a look. Man, this is kind of okay. So yeah, this is the leafleting saying, "Hey, we're gonna bomb you. You guys need to get to a quote unquote safe zone," which is, of course, the joke, because Rafah is supposed to be the safe zone. That's the joke. This is what you get for, a century of gatekeeping comedy writing. And this was Bibby yesterday, which I did when I tweeted this out. I said something to the effect of like, he's trying to pander to the more orthodox murderers. But here's the thing. This address isn't in the Hebrew, Israeli, whatever. Whatever. He's not talking to people in his own country. He's talking to Americans.
80 years ago, in the Holocaust, the Jewish people were totally defenseless against those who sought our destruction. No nation came to our aid. Today, we again confront enemies bent on our destruction. I say to the leaders of the world, no amount of pressure, no decision by any international forum will stop Israel from defending itself. As the Prime Minister of Israel, the one and only Jewish state, I pledge here today from Jerusalem on this Holocaust Remembrance Day. If Israel is forced to stand alone, Israel will stand alone. But we know we're not alone because countless decent people around the world support our just cause. And I say to you, we will defeat our genocidal enemies. Never again is now.
Okay, they're counting crazy pants. I kind of want to walk through in waders, of course, that river of bullshit for a moment, if we could. Let's go bit by bit with this. I think that would be bib official. Because there's a whole lot of crazy to unpack in a relatively short amount of time. So let's give that a shot. Sure. Let's do this.
3 years ago, in the Holocaust, the Jewish people were totally defenseless.
Quick fact check on that, Bibby. If you look at where the ADL and a number of other people like start the Holocaust, that one, definitely not defenseless. Two, he's going to pretend. I think he says, yeah, let's let him say
those who sought our destruction. No nation came to our aid.
No nation. According to Benjamin Netanyahu, World War II ended while the Jews were being holocausted only by the Jews. They somehow had munitions factories, underground tunnels. That's what it was. The Hogan's Heroes style. They had a series of tunnels that led to a secret underground munitions factory where they were able to, in a relatively amazingly short amount of time, manufacture enough artillery, air support, bombs, and then also feed and train the relative amount of soldiers that, according to the history books, happen to actually be the armies of the Allies with overwhelming support, read cannon fodder of native-born Russian troops, while the leadership in Stalin's army tended to be what do you call it? Jewish Zionist. Yeah. Anyway, let's go back to this bullshit again. I was only 14 seconds by the 13 seconds of just unmitigated bullshit from this little fair-faced demon.
Today, we again confront enemies bent on our destruction. I say to the leaders of the world, no amount of pressure, no decision by any international forum will stop Israel from defending itself.
He is, of course, referring to the fact that there have been reports that the International Criminal Court has prepared an arrest warrant for one Benjamin Netanyahu stroke Mile Kowski. Little Benny Mile Kowski, the Polish resident of Philadelphia, now, of course, the prime minister of a fake country that hell-bent on exterminating its neighbors. Okay.
As the Prime Minister of Israel, the one and only Jewish state, I pledge here today from Jerusalem on this Holocaust Remembrance Day. If Israel is forced to stand alone, Israel will stand alone.
So I think the red brick backdrop is significant, but I don't know why. But I think it's significant. It's supposed to evoke something Holocausty, maybe. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not. I know they're a big fan of the optics, though. Politicians in general.
But we know we're not alone, because countless decent people around the world.
So, a point of note on this, you gotta always pretend that it's you against everyone else, like you don't have damn near the full weight and force of all of the Western militaries. Like you don't have enough blackmail on enough world leaders to hold them at bay long enough for you to do this shit over the last 8 months. The amount of rearranging reality necessary in order to even partially believe a drop of bullshit and or venom that is coming out of this just garbage human's mouth. Boy, does that require some from birth brainwashing.
Support our just cause. And I say to you, we will defeat our genocidal enemies. Never again is now.
So Bibi only puts on the tiny hat costume for stuff like this. He's a pre-admitted atheist, as a ton of the leaders of the IDIOF, the Knesset, cabinet ministers, things of that nature. Golly, kids, it's almost like religion can be used as a cudgel to exploit brainwashed people into thinking that they're somehow superior to other human beings, which can drive them to do things that lead to genocide. Taylor Hudak is back with us on the program. Taylor is an internationally celebrated journalist and my good friend. And we're going to talk about some anti-Semitism laws because the United States is trying to turn into Angela Merkel's Germany, and it's a little weird.
Yeah, absolutely it is. So we'll be talking about the new anti-Semitism bill that was passed in the House. I believe it still has to go through the Senate. But, I have to tell you, Steve, when I saw this, I was quite surprised because it reminded me of the policies that are already in place in Germany. Germany, has a different legal system than we have. And of course, the policies aren't exactly the same. It is under criminal law in Germany, where it is, it could be a criminal offense if you are to trivialize events that took place during the 1930s and 40s. But this is coming through the Department of Education, but we'll get into all of that. But it's actually quite surprising. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but I was when I saw that the House is trying to pass this because it's so clearly unconstitutional.
Well, and this is something that AIPAC and the ADL and a number of other organizations within the larger collective Jewish lobby have been trying to get passed in the United States since at least 2016, when they started introducing language similar, a resolution similar, but there wasn't, I guess, such a obvious reason to want to be like, oh, that thing you're all watching? You don't get to talk about it anymore, at least not in the way that we'd say you can't. So we're going to go ahead and throw some money bombs potentially at universities and NGOs. It doesn't seem to be unleashed on the general public at large, at least the way the act is written, but that doesn't mean a damn thing.
I know. I am still at this point trying to understand exactly what this is going to look like if it does pass. I don't think it is exactly the same as the policies in Germany, where anybody could be prosecuted, criminally prosecuted, could be fined, could be even put in jail for engaging in some of this activity or for some of their own speech. But I think that this is a step in the very wrong direction. It's a step in that direction where it could open the door potentially for there to be criminality attached to someone's speech and someone's criticism of a foreign government. I mean, that's what this is all about. I mean, it literally states here, I'm looking at this new definition of anti-Semitism, where it seems that criticizing the state of Israel, the government itself, could be considered anti-Semitic. And that is also what they have in Germany. It's a little bit more complex than that. They take into account a number of other factors as well when seeking criminality or determining the criminality of the statements. And I know that a lot of this stuff can get really boring, but yeah, it's such a scary thing that we're seeing here. Oh, I can't hear you for some reason.
Oh, sorry. No, too many buttons. It's crazy. Like literally insane.
Yeah.
The language that they've inserted into this, what they're trying to bend reality to, and then in a broader context, what they're trying to say that means to everyone who says they're Jewish. Yeah, because I don't know, man. It seems like there's been a lot of criticism leveled at the pro-Palestinian protesters because they're Jewish, and because Jewish Voice for Peace and a couple of other groups take money from the Tides Foundation. The Tides Foundation is Soros cut out, and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation throw money at it and stuff like that. So they're getting, legitimately, but they're a Jewish organization. So now you're saying that even if you're part of the protected class, if you're a college professor, if you work for a nonprofit organization, and let's be honest, there's an overrepresentation of Jewish people in both of those professions. Yeah, in terms of like percentage of population of the United States, people that are in management positions, leadership roles, have teaching gigs, all that kind of stuff, overrepresentation among the Jewish population. So you're saying that a disproportionate amount of your nonprofit organizations and your colleges and universities are now under this giant censorship, I don't know, fucking hammer. And you step out of line one time, and you make a legitimate criticism about your own government or your own country, and now it's hate speech, and you're done.
Exactly. And even if, at this point, as I said, I don't think that you could be like put in jail for making these statements under this bill, but it still will stain you for the rest of your life. It will definitely impact your ability to, hold a career, have implications for your personal life as well. And let's be clear, this will be weaponized and used against people for political reasons, for other reasons. That's exactly what happened with another case that I covered that I'm sure people, they may not be too familiar with it because it was a case in Germany, that of a German doctor who was actually put on trial for making alleged anti-Semitic remarks. He was found not guilty. But what happens here is that it could ruin the person's reputation, and it could have real consequences. And again, this is just the first step in the wrong direction.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Other rules of construction, sure, but there really isn't any sort of direct consequence.
That's what I was looking at too. Like, what is going to happen to the person if they were to be, if a complaint was made about them? Like, what is the consequence for this? I did not take it that it would be like a jail time or anything like that. So I am curious as to what that may be.
The most that I've heard out of it is that they're going to go after funding. And if you're labeled an anti-Semitic group or a hate group, then you're automatically DQ'd from getting any sort of, any sort of money, or at least federally. I don't know. The ACLU has become pretty feckless over the last several years.
Yeah, I agree, especially over the COVID policies as well. I mean, didn't they say that it was a human right to instill vaccine passports or QR codes, that sort of thing? So I wouldn't put a whole lot of faith in them. But I would say one positive thing about this, and maybe this is a little bit naive, so shoot me down if it's naive, Steve, but I've seen a lot of people, even those who are very pro-Israel, saying that this bill should be stopped and that it's not acceptable and that it is very unconstitutional. So I think that's actually a good thing. I think it's quite helpful to have the those people who are very pro-Israel to be coming out against this.
No, that's fair. That's a fair point. The problem is that it still had a 320 to 91 vote in the House, and that it's, there's an over-representation again in the Senate, where the vast majority of those, freaking Congress critters are way more inclined to go ahead and side with, let's clamp down on speech, let's make it harder for NGOs to, operate. And then, I'm not a huge fan of the nonprofit industrial complex. It's, but when you're targeting individuals and punishing their place of business because they said something that you don't like, regardless of whether or not it's true, that's one of the exact functions of government that I just hate.
Exactly. It doesn't matter if what is stated is true. That's what it seems in this particular bill. And then also, too, you bring up, about these different legislators, senators, that sort of thing. Many of them do hold dual citizenships with the United States and Israel, which honestly, I think nobody in a position of power should be allowed to hold that position if they have a dual citizenship, probably with any country. And I have dual citizenship with Hungary. And it's probably something that we should reconsider if we should allow people with dual citizenship to hold office. But anyways, in this bill, you wouldn't be allowed to question that. You wouldn't be allowed to point it out or even ask the question like, hey, do you perhaps maybe have an allegiance to this other country and not the people that you are meant to serve here in America? You can't even bring up that point. But another interesting thing is legally, I wonder how they're able to get away with this, because it seems to only apply to one specific group of people, not, say everybody with dual citizenship or all religious groups or all ethnicities, that sort of thing. So I think this seems really sloppy, and I'm trying to understand, is there something else to this that I'm not catching? Again, I haven't researched it too closely here, the United States policy that they're trying to pass, but I think that it's just so obviously unconstitutional that there may be something else at play here. I don't know.
Well, and I think that's why they're trying to leave it as a resolution, and not make it full legislation, because then immediately you would have court challenges there's 38 states that have the anti-BDS legislation. That's on the books. It's not a resolution. Individual states are saying you can't boycott, divest, or issue sanctions against the totally fake country of Israel, or people who represent it, businesses who represent it. So there's, again, that's an overrepresentation, because I don't feel like the majority of the populations in 38 U.S. freaking states are Jewish. I don't think it's a Jewish majority in those populations. That seems to be a little weird, because as far as I know, any other form of business, and I think every freaking country, you can boycott in every state. You can say, no, I don't want to do business with them. If they're invested in my bank, I'm going to take my money out of that bank. I don't have to worry about a reprisal. So yeah, it's wildly disproportionate. And again, now just saying that under these rules, if I ran a nonprofit, that nonprofit would be under a radar, be labeled a hate group. They told those freaking kids at Columbia and Yale and everywhere else, like, hey, Mossad is here taking your pictures and filming you, and we're gonna make it so you have to freaking pour coffee for the rest of your life with your Columbia degree.
Right. And correct me if I'm wrong, this also includes the creation or the appointing of some sort of anti-Semitism like commissioner. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Where people can make complaints. Yeah, it's so draconian. Again, this goes back to what I had studied with what they have in Germany. They have the same system. They have for each state, I believe, they have a commissioner on anti-Semitism, and they have put a lot of funding, especially in certain states in Germany, to prosecute these crimes, which are things like if you have certain symbols, use certain terms, or if you, again, equate, say, for example, in the case that I covered, if you equate the COVID-19 injections in that overall campaign to the Holocaust or Nazi Germany, if you do that, you can very well be prosecuted for that because it's viewed as a trivialization of the Holocaust. So they don't have the same free speech laws that we have, but this implementing that in America is so obviously a violation of the First Amendment. But it, as I was saying earlier, and I didn't quite articulate this well, was that it will be used against dissidents. There will be people who are making complaints against others. Oh, this person said this, or they acted in this way. Say if this were to become a legislation more similar to that in Germany, because when I covered Suture Bhakti's case, the doctor, you could watch or not watch, but read the full article on Children's Health Defense Europe website. I looked into the people who made the complaints against him, and I was stunned at some of the stuff that I found. Maybe I shouldn't have been surprised, but on their social media, one of them had a certificate in counterterrorism, which did make me question, okay, who is this person? They were actually a doctor. They are a doctor, but they had this counterterrorism certificate. They also were photographed attending various counterterrorism conferences in Israel, also the German or the Munich Security Conference, as well as a number of other of these conventions and events that people who are very, I would say, closely tied to the intelligence community would be attending, or that they want to be closely tied to the intelligence community would be attending. So I think this could potentially be weaponized, and we should look to, these cases in Germany to see potentially this could happen in the US as well.
Yeah, I'm pulling up the CHD Europe article.
Yeah, it's been a while since I wrote it. There's a lot in there, but you will see like the links that they went and that they're still going to prosecute this case. And again, I can't emphasize enough. No, this is not the exact same laws that they're trying to pass in America, but it will become that if we allow this to be passed through the Senate.
And this is the real like incrementalism of the state. As much as I dislike Jordan Peterson, I've talked about this before. He's brought up on Rogan, like the way that tyranny happens, it isn't you just wake up one morning and you're surrounded by massive concrete walls and everything's just hemmed in and ready to go. It's inch by inch by inch, and then you finally push back or say, hey, what the fuck's going on? They stop, but they don't give any ground back. They just stop. And then as soon as you go back to doing your thing again, they push and push and push and push, and you say stop, and they don't retreat any. And before you know it, it's 3 years, 5 years have gone by, and you've been moved miles from where your original point of saying, hey, wait, that's enough was. And that's exactly what this legislation does. Ryan Cristian is here because it's T-Lab Tuesday. So we're going to bring him in. Ladies and gentlemen, the founder and host of The Last American Vagabond, our good friend and brother, Ryan Cristian. What's happening, buddy?
What's going on? Good morning. Taylor, good to see you.
Hi, good to see you.
So I thought I mistakenly said last night that that was going to be the last time I was going to be in the studio, but of course this morning we're having some kind of hitch with the drywall being sent. So I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going to be here for another week or so. So I'm back in this. But people last night watching my show were like, he lied. He's back in that same studio.
Oh man. Well, look, it's at least it's not you doing the drywall, and that's all that really matters at the end of it. It really is. Man,
you wouldn't want to see me do that stuff.
Bro, we left a job in Milpitas, where like, I mean, really for the week, it was probably we were on day 3 of sanding and a remodel. Went and grabbed lunch, little taqueria. There's 2 cops that are walking out when we're walking in, and we had just, because this is a good time to wear a mask, kids. When you're sanding drywall, that's what the mask is for.
Right, exactly.
So you take the mask off, and you're still kind of, you still got a nice layer because masks don't really work like that. Because you have facial hair, or I did, and the cop, obviously wearing freaking construction gear, getting out of a white truck, tools and all that shit. Cops look at us and go, "Damn, you look like you spent all day in the coke mine."
Nice.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks, buddy. Thanks.
No, it's funny. It's funny about the mask, though. It's interesting the overreaction, which it's expected. Like we talk about with all the other things, sustainability, the terms they don't mean. Like, it's funny how I made the joke about this not too long ago about the hand sanitizer stuff, is that, or even just washing your hands, where you got to this point where people, because they recognized the obvious reality that we're being lied to about that, went to the point to where, like, when you're wearing a mask now, for in cases where it's appropriate, you get like, "Oh, Steve, whoever, you're wearing a mask, you're buying the lies." And it's like, hold on, though, we should still be washing our hands. We should still be, like, these things were never the wrong thing to do. The one I said before was where I was, I think we were at a movie and we got popcorn, and I took out I have like a natural, like, bee honey, like, hand sanitizer thing, so I don't have to get up and wash my hands. And they're like, rolled their eyes at me, and I'm like, what, when that had that conversation, I'm like, this is appropriate. Like, this, I don't want your hands unclean digging through popcorn that I'm going to put in my mouth. That's not crazy. That's normal hygiene.
Do people not remember that you've been a chef?
Yeah,
and
classes, the serve safe, whatever. But even then, I remember things that we talked about then that interestingly came back up in my mind during the COVID-19 lives, because back then I wasn't pushing back. I was just being taught for my job. And I taught those classes about how they were supposed to be safe and sanitary. And it's funny how, but even then, those things changed. In the circles of chefs in our restaurants and so on, we used to laugh about that. How from year to year, we would have to get the updates. And I'm like, so they changed the degree. So now it's not 41, it's 40 degrees. So it's like everything below that has to be a certain. I'm like, so we were all killing everybody for the last 1,000 years by doing it 41. It's like, it's just so strange how they just arbitrarily change it. It's like the food pyramid. Who knows if they even know what they're talking about? Usually it seems they don't.
Well, if they change the temperature by 1 degree across the board, think of how much more energy that's using and how much more money the electric company can make.
That's a good point. Yeah. I tend to think it's just more like over, like just assuming they're coming from an honest place, which, tends to not be the case, but that they would be, aiming low in order to make sure that you're like so far below it that even if you end up missing it by a mark, that you're still in the safe zone kind of thing. But, there's so much bureaucracy these days. It's hard not to see, at least consider that there could be some ulterior motive. It's fun.
The F and FEMA camp stands for fun.
Camp will be fun.
In South Virginia, they heard tenors and drove down there. And we battled for the border with soldiers forging on that country, but we died for our faith. Under the flag of the greenback dollar on the peso down Mexico. And we battled for the border with soldiers forging on that country, but we died for our faith. Under the flag of the greenback dollar on the peso down Mexico.
That's really good one.
Hey, man. Hey, Steve, would you do Elijah's Church?
He's got a lot of
Man, just do it. Or you got any new songs?
Get your momentum work.
Like a dull knife, just ain't cutting. Just talking loud, just say nothing. Just say nothing. Just say nothing. You can't tell me how to run my life down. You can't tell me how to keep my business sound. You can't tell me what I'm doing wrong when you keep driving and singing that same old funny song. You can't tell me which way to go. 'Cause 3 times 7 and then some more. You can't tell me. Hey! You're like a dull knife, just ain't cutting. You're just talking loud and say nothing. Just say nothing. Just say nothing. Don't tell me how to do my thing when you can't do your own. Don't tell me how to be a boy when you know I'm grown. You can't use me like a woman when you throw away her dress. And you can't tell me how to use my medicine. You like a dull knife, Jack. You just ain't cutting. You're just talking loud. Just say nothing. Just say nothing. Just say nothing. Shape up your bag. Don't worry about mine. My thing's together and I'm doing fine. Good luck to you. Just loud and wrong. Then keep on singing that same old funny song. Then keep on singing that same old funny song. Just keep on singing that same old funny song. Just keep on singing that same old funny song. Just keep on singing that same old funny. Ow! I got to. I want to. I must. I got to. Ace this, and the dust is dust. I must. Keep on. I will. I can't. Say I will. Morning is too dark. Will. Say I can't. You're on it. You're on it. I said you're on it. I said you're on it. I said you're on it. You can't tell me how to run my life down. And you can't tell me how to keep my business sound. You can't tell me what I'm doing wrong when you keep driving and singing that same old funny song. Like a dull knife, just ain't cutting. Just talking loud and say nothing. Just say nothing. Just say nothing. Just say nothing. Just say it. Wait a minute. Shape up your bag. Don't worry about mine. My thing's together. Just doing fine. Good luck to you over there. It's a lot of wrong. Just keep on singing. Just keep on singing. Just keep on singing. Keep on singing. Keep on singing. That same old funny song. Just keep on singing. Keep on singing. That same old funny song. 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 Just keep running. Yeah. So we're gonna do something funny right here. We're gonna do something funny right here. So keep the tape running, Ron. Keep the tape running. We're gonna do something funny right here. We're gonna stop real quick and rap a little. And then we're gonna keep it going. Wait a minute. Stop, fellas. Good. I says keep on singing. 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 Come. Now, can't tell me what I'm doing wrong. When you give me, can't do your own. You can't tell me how to feel, boy. What, when you're doing wrong? Ha. When you know I'm wrong. Yeah. You can't tell me how to run my mess. You can't tell me. You can't tell me. You can't tell me. You can't tell me. You just can't use me like a woman. Throw away her dress. You can't tell me how to run my mess. Shake, 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 shake. Hard for me to say sometimes. And my thank you. Shape, shape up your bag. Worry about mine. My thing together. I'm doing fine. Good luck to you. It's loud and wrong. Good luck to you. It's loud and wrong. Where's it? Where's it? It's over there. Show enough. Right over there. What are you doing, Martin? Is he marching? Talking that thing. Talking black and living. Yeah, doing it. Talking black and living all the Negro you can. How you jiving? Yeah. You can march on and get yourself a gig. Jiving. Don't be driving nobody. They don't mean it, don't be in it. That's right. Get out of it. Tell me what to do. Do my own thing. I don't need your help, brother. Yeah. I don't need your thing. Now, if you're going to get down and be a man and help the people, and we're together. Tell me how to do my thing and you ain't doing nothing. Now, the name of the game is unity. Yeah. Everybody get together and work together. Be ye black or white. It's right. Yeah. It's neither black or white, it's right. It's neither white or black, it's a fact. Hey. You got to be a man. Get yourself a gig and get off of that thing. Do something. Show everybody you're trying to do it. Yeah. Show everybody you're trying to do it. Right on. Show everybody you're trying to be right on. Right on. Show everybody where you're at. Right on. Tell me where he at. Good luck to you, Mr. Loud and Wrong.
What is this garbage you're watching? I want to watch the news.
Are you making headway?
This is Walker, thank you very much. What's happening, everybody? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, wherever you're hanging out. It's the AM Wake Up.
Okay, there is no need for that name call. You bitch!
You got a second one.
Happens when my family's murdered by the CIA, Steve.
Won't you vax that thing up? Y'all talking about eating ass in here? Why are you talking about eating ass in here?
The idea of comedy, really, is not everybody should be laughing. It should be about 50 people laughing and 50 people horrified.
Trying to have serious conversations about a serious thing. Y'all talking about eating the booty.
We should nip it in the bud.
nobody can dispute the fact that we need. Oh yeah.
Tony Fauci Gumbo Suppository. You have direct insertion.
Sometimes I retract into my shell in order to avoid some of the drama that we've seen recently, but...
Did you hear the question, Senator? Running for re-election in 2026?
Spooks in space.
If you want to fight against the country, you need an F-15. You need something a little more than a gun. No, I'm not joking. Think about this.
Whatever. Taxation stuff.
Oh! God damn it, motherfucker!
I love you guys. We'll see you soon. Good luck to us all.
But wait! There's more.
What is it? It's May 8th. Wow, I'm doing fantastic. May 8th, 2024. What's happening, everybody? Let's bring Teace up because it's Wednesday. I saw Chris pop in and then pop out and then pop back in again. All right.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't even have my freaking earbuds plugged in yet. I needed like an extra hour this morning. For sure.
I don't have anything running on this computer, but it's
got that James Brown going.
100% of my CPU.
You what? Who, huh?
My computer is going to collapse. I'm assuming I'm not running anything on this computer except this one browser. That's it. And it's eating up 100% of my CPU.
Wow.
I have no other windows open, no other browsers. Yeah.
All right. Well,
so most likely it's gonna glitch and it's gonna drop out.
If you guys in the chat want to start making side bets on when Chris's computer collapses and then take like 10% of that and throw it towards the show, winner, whoever gets the Chris's computer Deadpool prize, take like 10, maybe 15% of it, throw it back towards Chris, towards the replacement of the computer. That way everybody gets to do a little participation thing. Somebody gets to make a little scratch. And
90% of the CPUs used at all times just with the one browser open.
Thanks, StreamYard.
Let's see what happens when I do that. Anyways.
All right. So Driz has $20 on a half an hour in. All right, that's where we're going to start it. So we got, 7:30 Pacific time. First $20 on the table. Yes, sir. I know. I'm planning on rolling that at some point. We got a good show for you this morning. Tony Arterburn, the great Tony Arterburn and Wise, will be with us in hour 3. I'm looking forward to that conversation. Tony's rad. Bunch of weird shit going on. The Jews lost Dilbert.
Oh yeah.
No,
Dilbert.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys saw that or not, but remember old Vax Adams? Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert, who first, was shaming the hell out of everyone that had the slightest question about Operation Warp Speed. Teace, your hand is up, sir.
This is the guy who was on a live interview talking about how he was in so much mental and physical anguish all the time that he was going to kill himself in a year's time unless that was resolved. And then when he switched his medication, such issues magically disappeared. Gee, I wonder if he's maybe a little bit mentally compromised in one way or another.
Perhaps.
Yeah, that guy.
I didn't know. What was that?
Dude, he did like a live interview where he was talking about like he was just like in complete mental, which fine, like, dude, I get it. Holy fuck, I have a huge history of being massively depressed. But if like swapping your meds out automatically alleviates that, gee, I wonder if it had something to do with the meds you were on. So that's one of those things. Look at how many people are on how many different things just to cope with the times, and then give those people a major platform and a cartoon metaphor of how fucked they are. Yeah, it's going to be pretty fucked.
So let's fast forward a little bit through the journey of Vax Adams then, because he was shaming everyone that was even remotely like had a question about the jab.
Yeah.
And then when it was like monumentally too late, he had an epiphany that he'd been lied to by greedy marketers. And that was the problem. And it wasn't that us, who had
okay. What is that? 5 minutes in.
Should have taken the under.
Yeah.
Chat should have taken the under. Bum, 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 At any rate, Vax Adams had an epiphany, and it wasn't that we were right; we were still wrong.
Yeah.
And lucky that it turned out that these titans of industry happen to also be greedy, yeah. So this happened yesterday. And look, I'm not saying that he isn't sitting back there trying to calculate when his about faces are going to be. We're talking about this guy, John Vax Adams.
Yeah, like he went, or hold on, he had tweets up where he's like, no, anti-vaxxers, you knew, how did you know? And he was like trying to figure it out. And then he was like, even then you can't fucking tell the dude because it seems so crazy. Because it's like people who are just starting to enter into the 9/11 truth thing. They always start with Bush did it. And it's like, you guys, it's a lot more complicated than Bush did it. And it's like that trajectory of Lego blocks building up to something more substantial. And it's just painful to watch. So, yeah, go ahead.
And those Lego blocks just happen to be in the shape of Building 7.
Yeah. And his father, who had him as president to be the patsy if need be.
Right. Well, once you've made your kid jerk off in a coffin in front of all your friends.
Yep.
I want to know the full list of what I'm not supposed to fucking say. And I'm going to say everything on that fucking list every day. Give me the list. Give me the fucking list of what I'm not supposed to say about Israel, about what I'm not supposed to say about Jews. And you make that illegal, I'm going to say it every fucking day. And I am anti-Israel, period.
I would just like to make an offer right now. I would like to present to Vax Adams the consulting firm of AM Wakeup. And but we'll come back to this. But I would like to present an offer to Mr. Scott Adams right now for the services, the consulting firm of AM Wakeup, and for a substantial fee, myself, Chris, Teace, Ryan, we'll get him on. He's got plenty of things that, and we will again, for a substantial fee, we will instruct and advise Scott Adams on all of the things that you can't say about the state of Israel. So, I mean, proposal made, and we'll see if, but yeah, Scott, if you need a hand and you would like, legitimately, you would like to know more about what you're not allowed to say about Israel, we will, for, again, a substantial amount of money. We will teach you.
Steve is joking. We don't sell out. That's not going to happen. Welcome back, Chris. Anyway,
consult. It's a consultation.
It's just like these mainstream influencer motherfuckers literally never make their way into any conversation that would reveal them for like the hack shield dipshit fucking retards that they actually are. So it's one of those things where they're just going to circle the bowl of whatever the fuck shit they're full of so that they can hang out with people just like them and never actually accomplish anything. It's like, don't expect more than that. He's going to stay in the toilet bowl he was born in. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe he was born a beautiful and wonderful soul and he eventually ended up like this. Who the fuck knows?
As an excellent observation, Whipple Dangle. Whenever you see anybody with multiple copies of the same book in the background behind them, they're a book salesman. They are. All right.
I am fucking anti-Israel because the ADL, I know is the ADL doesn't work for Israel, but if Israel doesn't shut their fucking dog down, which is the ADL, their little attack dog, they can shut them down tomorrow. Shut them the fuck down. I can't have the ADL and this law at the same time.
I love how he showcases just how little he knows about all of this every time he opens his mouth. Because the point that you were making earlier, Teace, about like, how did you know? I remember that. And I remember mocking him relentlessly. Ryan was like, gosh, Scott, how could we have known? And then just listed all of the studies and the statements and everything that everyone involved had been saying before, during, and currently. Well, I don't know, pal. I don't know. The ADL, boy. That's the only lobby, it's gonna be a long walk, Vax Adams.
Cannot have the ADL in business accusing people of being Holocaust deniers with this particular system. Fuck Israel. Fuck Israel. Fuck the ADL. This can't stand. If you want to make me fucking hate the people you want me to like, keep doing this. Keep telling me you're going to put me in fucking jail for my opinion. In this case, an opinion I didn't even hold.
He accidentally gets it.
You motherfuckers. And by the way,
and if
somebody votes for this, I need the whole list of anybody in the Senate who votes for this. I want to know if there's any fucking Republican who votes for this. If you're a Republican in the Senate and you vote for this, you're my enemy.
Look at their citizenship, dipshit.
I will defame you in every fucking way I can figure out how to do it. I will figure out who your opponents are, and I'll help fund them.
Oh, guess what? The opponents you fund, they're on the same side, you fucking retard.
Okay, now I appreciate the commentary because of how fucking just dumb as a post this guy is. And yet, like, people would, I don't know if anybody takes him. You guys, I don't know if he's out here for any other purpose than punching bag. Like, I don't know who's being influenced by Vax Adams, but boy, oh boy, every once in a while, is it nice to just hang out the car window with a baseball bat and take out a mailbox. He's also got Wise Wolf Gold, which makes him probably smarter and definitely richer than us. Tony, welcome to the show, my friend. How you doing? Good to see you.
It's not all it's cracked up to be. It's good to see you, Steve.
How you doing, man? How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Heck yeah. It's a very silly world that we live in. And I did want to have a kind of a broader conversation about the various methods that the central bank digital currency is getting introduced and the various ways that they're going to, it's not really a CBDC. Go ahead and give us your retina and your butthole and everything else that we need from you. But it's, independent private coin that just on the back end can only be processed through and changed into a CBDC. And I'm kind of curious as to like where you're seeing the landscape in terms of how people are really absorbing this kind of information, especially when it comes to like everybody being funneled into X because X is turning into the WeChat of the West, thanks to the free speech hero Elon Musk.
Well, this goes back a very long way. I mean, it's been the goal of the banksters to create a unified currency that they control and, indefinitely. And you go, Mayor Ramshaw Rothschild said in the 19th century, I care not who sits on the British throne. The person who controls the British Empire is the person who controls the British money supply, and I control the British money supply. So really, we live, in the 20th century, you got the introduction of the crown jewel of all central banks, which was the Federal Reserve Bank, to take the power, manufacturing power, and energy of the United States and transmute it into criminality and our money supply. And that's unfortunate because if you go back and you peel away the layers of history, you find that crime to expose things like World War I and II, the Cold War, our society in general, the collapse of Western civilization, all brought to you in part by fake money. And the dream has always been, and going back to things like the cover of The Economist in 1989 with there's that famous, it's got the double-headed eagles, time for world currency. You had people like Bill Cooper, who wrote Behold a Pale Horse, who talked about using the new technologies, things that were coming out with that were surfacing from IBM and others to create a unified currency. But we're here now because of blockchain. They've made that leap. I looked at things like decentralized blockchain technologies like Bitcoin, which I like. Until I learn otherwise, I like it, and I've been using it, and it's been part of my business since 2016. But I think the fear here, and I think the worst case scenario is where you get things like the Bank of International Settlements and the IMF have come up with something called the Unicoin, where you have a clearinghouse for all digital currencies tracking back to one thing. And that's the unified, one world currency model, but it would just be all these other countries linking up. And the World Economic Forum put out they were gleefully saying, 98% of countries are adopting central bank digital currencies, which is something that they need to implement their Great Reset, which is really just a dressed up phrase for the New World Order. But the good news is that I've been talking about this for years, and now I see people just totally understand what I'm saying. I mean, 2 years ago, I was going to speak at some like conservative groups, and one I spoke in North Texas in December of 2022, and I was talked about CBDC. Nobody knew what I was talking about, and I said, no, it's central bank digital currency. I said, this is what they're not talking about in any of these, forums, or these candidates aren't bringing up. I said, but that's what you really have to watch. Now, when I go and do that, or if I'm speaking, people start nodding. Hey, we've heard of this, and it's a good thing. Will that stop the powers that be from implementing it? No, but it could just be dead on arrival, I hope it's inert. I mean, I think they're going to do it. They have the papers drawn up. The Biden administration, the Trump administration worked on it too. I mean, Jared Kushner pushed this thing really hard, the central bank digital currency. Biden has put an executive order out early in his presidency to make all branches of anything that's in the periphery of the executive do a report on how they would implement the central bank digital currency. So it's coming. It's FedCoin. They did the Fed Now program back in July of last year. It's kind of the piggy bank. Or piggyback off of it to build the structure for the central bank digital currency. So it's coming, but the good news, like I said, people are aware. I think they're starting to look at the currency and money, skeptically, as you should. You should know the difference between currency and money, and I think people are starting to come online to that. It really is fascinating to watch.
And this has WorldCoin getting a whole bunch of people in Argentina on the iris scan for $50 in crypto.
Yeah, Sam Altman.
Well, he's got nuclear power now. Did you know that?
Nuclear power, really?
Sam Altman is involved in nuclear power. OpenAI. Here, let me pull that up. We had that in the doc today. Altman is so it's him, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, These are our nuclear future pioneers, Tony. Don't you feel good about that?
I feel great.
Shareholder approval for New York Stock Exchange listing. Yeah. AI nukes. The company is called Oklo. Altman's chairman of the nuclear company to design and deploy advanced fission power plants to provide clean and affordable energy needed to power the flood of data centers popping up around the nation. It's part of the AI revolution.
I always thought it was interesting. You had Sam Altman, who comes up with the world coin. Just give up your biometrics. Enter in the transhumanist 21st century. And then you had Sam Bankman, which the Bankman fried, and he had FTX and that whole controlled demolition of the crypto market a couple of years ago, which really something that people should still be paying attention to. What happened afterwards with Silicon Valley Bank and Silvergate Bank and some of those regionals. As we're going back to talk about the central bank digital currency, that's how they'll implement it. They'll implement the central bank digital currency on the back of a banking crisis. They'll get you, it'll be, just download this new technology. This will save it. And this is the answer to it. Now that's what they'll be using to bring that in. It's what we have to be watching for.
And if it's being manufactured on every conceivable end. You look at how much it costs to go to the grocery store. You look at how much it costs to fill a vehicle. Just to go to work every day, take your kids to school every day. I don't know about Texas, but California right now, it's like approaching $6 a gallon again. And nobody's even talking about cost. You remember it was even like a year and a half ago, Biden was giving himself a pat on the depends for dropping gas prices, and how they were trying to talk about how like the inflation thing wasn't real. It was all in our head. Do you remember when we got gaslit over, and then it was a good thing?
Right. Well, it was transitory. See, inflation, it was transitory. Jerome Powell, Janet Yellen, it was transitory. And then it wasn't. And then they were hawkish. And then they raised rates faster than any time in history. But you're right. Biden released this giant swath of crude oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which is used for emergencies or wartime that we stock up. And he's made us very vulnerable because they haven't replaced it. He did that. He released it into the economy. And of course that brought down the price of gasoline a little bit because it flooded the market with supply, but the price has since gone up and we're not buying it back. We're not replacing the oil that we put in. The calls are coming from inside the house. So literally it's a controlled demolition from the inside. We're watching this. James Forrestal, who was, pushed out of a window at Bethesda Naval Hospital, he told Joe McCarthy, he said, if your leaders were just stupid, that every once in a while they'd err in your favor. But since they don't, that's how you know it's on purpose.
I keep trying to, Tony, I can't tell you how many years I've been screaming at people, if the coincidences all go one way, they're not coincidences.
Thanks again for tuning into another episode of the Independent Review. Hope to see you all next Friday.